across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk Drive. It's a real pleasure to have your company this Wednesday evening. Thanks so much for it. There's plenty to discuss, including drivers facing a 1 pint limit in a major tightening of drink drive laws. Is that a good thing? Surely we don't want people who are over the limit on the roads, but what should that limit actually be? And what about the country pub? What about people who need to drive to and from a pub? Of course, they've been under so much pressure in recent years. We'll talk about that and what Labour's plan on that. Kemi Badenoch calls for the police chief of West Midlands to go over the Israeli football fan ban. We talked about that yesterday. We'll see a little bit more of it today as well. Also, Nigel Farage opposing Labour's fuel duty plans and says he wants to cut down energy bills. He's also announced Leila Cunningham, who is the new candidate for them for Mayor of London for Reform UK. The UK and France committing to deploying troops in Ukraine if a peace deal happens, to have them essentially as peacekeepers. Also, support for the US seizing that tanker. We'll talk about all of that with Rear Admiral Chris Parry in a minute or two. Jimmy Misson's killer, big story in The Sun, the killer of a schoolboy, totally innocent schoolboy, standing in a bakery. He was killed by an absolute thug called Jake Farry. The killer has now been moved to an open prison after he was hauled back to jail after a rap video boasting about the teen's murder. There's just, we'll talk to the teen's father. We'll talk to Jimmy Misson's father, Barry. He'll be live in the studio. We'll also talk to the former Justice Secretary, Alex Chalk, about plans to force a vote on Labour plans to axe juries. This is the Conservatives talking about this. And also £100 million bill for you to pay for an unusable prison, as MPs have branded the Ministry of Justice handling of the affair a catastrophic failure and an absolute disgrace. We'll talk about all of that and the weather, because new snow and wind warnings are here in the UK ahead of Storm Goretti. Hundreds of European flights have been grounded as well. We'll speak to Joe Wheeler about that a little bit later on. As always, I want your views on all these matters, no matter what we're talking about. Whatever is on the tip of your tongue, give me a ring. Let me know what you want to say. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring, or you can send me a WhatsApp text message on 0344 499 1000. Voice notes as well. Don't forget, less than a minute, please. You can also send me a tweet at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. There's so much to talk about between now and 7. I want your voice to be part of it. Stay with us here on Talk. First message we're going to read out into Talk Drive this evening. Good evening, Peter. Damon from Wigan. He's also said good evening to Jack. I'm not sure Jack is listening, my cat, but listen, thank you, Damon. He's probably asleep. I don't drive and never have, but my question on drink driving is this, says Damon. I understand the consequences for drink driving, but shouldn't the law be tightened up as regards age? Because your reflexes are not as quick as when they're younger, on how many accidents, what percentage, because of people not reacting quickly enough to prevent an accident. It's a really interesting point, but of course, we talked about this a little bit yesterday when it came to eye tests for over 70s. Lots of people had views on that as well. There are lots of people under 70 who could do with an eye test. There are lots of people under 70 who could do with being taken off the roads, it must be said. I don't drive that much, but when I do, I see some really shocking driving, and as a pedestrian and as a user of public transport, I see some of that as well. I just want to take a look at the Transport Minister Lillian Greenwood setting out the new proposal. This is what the Labour government wants to do. She spoke to the BBC this morning.
We're proposing a new limit, reducing it from 80 milligrams per 100 millilitres of blood to 50 milligrams, which would bring us in line with Scotland and almost every country in Europe. We want to send a very clear message to people that if you're going out for a drink, leave the car at home. If you know, there are alternatives. There's loads of our favourite brands now coming. Zero alcohol versions. We want to do something about the 260 people who were killed last year by a drink driver. It's completely preventable, and that's why we're going to take action.
Lillian Greenwood there, the Transport Minister. Amanda says, Peter, on drink driving limits, yet another blow to the hospitality section by this abomination of a government, says Amanda. Let's find out what Christopher Snowden thinks. He's Head of Lifestyle Economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Christopher, thank you for joining me today. What do you make of this?
I think it's a rather desperate publicity stunt that doesn't have any evidence to support it. You heard from the Transport Secretary there, she was talking about sending a message and bringing ourselves in line with Scotland and the EU. These are not reasons to do anything. We have some of the safest roads in the world. There's only about half a dozen countries have fewer road traffic accidents per capita than we do, and we know what happened in Scotland. This is the real point. If we believe in evidence-based policy, if we believe in the idea of devolution being a way for different parts of the UK to try things out, and if they don't work, the rest of us don't follow it, look at what happened in Scotland. We have two very solid peer-reviewed studies that looked at, after 2014, when Scotland lowered the limit to what's been proposed here, absolutely no reduction in road traffic accidents. Indeed,
well, wasn't there an initial reduction and then it went back up?
No, well, no, not really. There was the main study in the Lancet found that relative to England and Wales, the number of road traffic accidents rose. That's across the board, every type of road traffic accident, trivial or serious. And what we do also know, and one of these studies also showed it, is that it was associated, this dropping of the limit, to fewer sales in pubs and more sales in the off-trade, which is, of course, exactly what rural pubs in particular are concerned about.
Why do you think the government is doing it? Is it, you say, publicity stunt? Is it just virtue signalling? There will be many people, including my next guest, who will talk to you after you, who will say that any alcohol in your system whatsoever will impair you, and that is a bad thing if you get behind the wheel of a car, and actually this is a good policy. What would you say?
I don't think there's any science to back that up. And as I say, the evidence in Scotland and indeed around the world, I mean, the Transport Secretary is quite right to say that most countries have a lower limit than us. They don't have fewer road accidents than us. They don't have fewer drink driving deaths than us. I think it's untenable to say that any amount of alcohol impairs your driving. We used to talk about drunk driving.
I mean, it does.
Yeah,
it does impair your driving. If you have alcohol in your system, it does impair your driving. That is factual.
I don't agree. I don't agree that.
So is your position, Christopher, that, I mean, it's not a matter of opinion, it's a matter of fact. Are you honestly saying that if you have a pint of beer, it won't affect your reaction times?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, that's not true, Christopher, is it?
As far as I can see, it is true. I don't see why it would impair your reaction times relative to anybody else on the road.
If you have any alcohol, Christopher, it is a matter of scientific fact that alcohol impairs your reaction times. That is what happens.
Not at very low levels. We're talking about very low levels. We're trying to stop drunk drivers. This is the issue, you see, Peter. And this is why I think this is so misguided. It's typical, not just of this government, but of successive governments. You have a real problem, which is people getting bladdered, going out on the roads and killing people. Rather than deal with that, rather than try and police that properly and tackle that very serious issue, we hassle the law-abiding. We hassle people who aren't causing any accidents, who are just trying to go out, have a pint after work and come home again.
But you know and I know, though, Christopher, you know and I know, though, it's not just about the people who have one pint. It's any alcohol, meaning if you set a precedent, if you set a limit, and you essentially say, look, you have a single drink, you shouldn't be on the road, that will prevent people who have, some people anyway, who have lots of drinks from having even a drink. It'll have people at dinner parties, it'll have people who go out for a meal or whatever saying, look, I'm not going to drink at all because I'm getting behind the wheel of a car.
Well, it might do. There's pure speculation. You could equally well imagine people who have one pint think, oh, well, I'm over the limit now, I might as well keep going.
But not necessarily get behind the wheel of a car as a result of that.
Well, they might do. They might think, oh, apparently I'm over. I forgot that the limit's changed. I've had one pint. Do you honestly not think? 4 or 5. If we're in the realms of speculating, but
we're not speculating.
I want to look at what happened in Scotland.
Christopher, there has been a serious societal change in the last 20 or 30 years in regard to alcohol. You cannot argue, well, you can, but you're wrong to say that people would say, well, I'll just have one pint of alcohol or one drink of wine, and then I'll just keep going, and then I'll get behind the wheel of a car. There is a serious societal taboo of people getting behind the wheel of a car when they are drunk. That has changed in the last few years. You've got to admit that.
In the last few decades, yeah, of course I do. I don't see what that's got to do with what you're saying.
Well, it's got to do with what you've said. It's got to do with your saying that it's pure speculation to say that people who might just be having one drink would then go on to have lots of drinks, and there wouldn't be any preventative measure there.
No, obviously you're right. A lot of people, of course, the majority of people will obey the law. But the people who are obeying those laws, who might otherwise go out having had 1 pint of bitter, were never really causing any threat to anybody in the first place. Whereas the person who has the 1 pint thinks, oh, I'm over the limit now, I might as well keep going. They are the real threat. The people who are actually drunk. Not, in your view, very slightly impaired, possibly, but people who are drunk. That's what we need to stop.
Are we just missing the elephant in the room here, which is people under the influence of drugs who are driving?
Well, yeah, absolutely. There is that too. And that, again, it's illegal. We have the tests. But we're not adequately enforcing things. You know, this is, again, the problem in general with this country. We have more and more laws. We're constantly clamping down on this and that, but nobody's enforcing them.
Okay, Christopher, thank you. That's Christopher Snowden there, Head of Lifestyle Economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs. JB in Aberdeenshire says, Christopher, take note, a medical study of drivers and the effects of alcohol some years ago concluded that 1 pint of beer reduced the driver's reaction time by 11%. That could be the difference between life and death for a third party. If you drink any amount of alcohol and drive, then you're a selfish moron. Drink drivers found to be over the current legal limit should be banned for life in the view of JB from Aberdeenshire. I mean, it is just a matter of scientific fact that alcohol impairs your judgment. It may not necessarily cause an accident. It may not necessarily mean that you know, you get behind the wheel of a car and you can't drive home to some degree with safety. But if you have 1 drink, if I had 1 drink, I would not be getting behind the wheel of a car. I know it can be alcohol in your system from the night before. I know there are certain things that have alcohol in them, like mouthwash and liqueur, sweets and chocolates and things like that. But the point is that if you have a pint of beer, in my view, you should not be getting behind the wheel of a car or a glass of wine. It should be taboo, and it should be societally taboo as well. Luca Straker is campaign manager at Break Road Safety Charity. Luca, you're very welcome to the programme. The fact is that this campaign from you is a good one, and the law that they want to change is probably not a bad idea, but is it actually going to be enforced? Can we trust the police to go out with those breathalyzers and, crucially, get people who are drug drivers, who are under the influence of drugs, off the road as well? Because I'm not sure we can guarantee that, Luca.
Well, in the strategy that the government have outlined today, they're talking about not just this drink driving limit, but they're also talking about how they're going to tackle drug driving as well, and giving the police more opportunities to be able to test people, because that's one of the main issues they have with drug driving, is testing people at the side of the road. And like you say, encouraging people to not have 1 drink and think that it's okay to drive. Just listening to the conversation you were just having, it was the British Medical Association that says after 1 drink, you're actually significantly impaired when it comes to driving. So, you know, like you say, it's scientific fact that is there, and it's good to see that the government is listening to that and hoping to change that in the future.
What would you say to pubs and people in the pub sector, specifically country pubs, that will say people need to drive, or at least have some form of reliable transportation that's not a bus, it's not a train, it's not the kind of city dwelling way where there's actually loads of transport. It's the fact that those pubs are often on their knees, 40% more expensive than it was before COVID. They're going to be hit with business rates coming in the next couple of months, and they're in a situation where they need people to go there and to drink there, whether they drink alcohol or non-alcoholic drinks. They will look at this and say, the people who are not really the problem, people having 1 drink, they're not the issue. The people are the people who drink lots of alcohol and often don't get caught.
Well, I think that's another question for the government. That's not a road safety. We shouldn't be sacrificing road safety in order to help another sector. What we should be doing is making sure the roads are safe, and we should be making sure, the government should be making sure that there is suitable transport within all areas, that all areas of the UK, you can have adequate transport, whether that's kind of rural or whether that's urban. And so I would say that is a question to the government. But we shouldn't be sacrificing the safety of the roads for anyone. I don't think anybody wants to sacrifice safety.
What do you think about alco locks, about this idea that you could actually essentially put your mouth to a breathalyzer before a car is allowed to be driven?
Again, that's something that is being consulted on within the strategy, and you know, one of the things that we really.
But what's your view? I mean, you at Break, at the Road Safety Charity Break, will be putting a view to that consultation, presumably. So, what is your view?
Well, we're going to compile all the evidence and put our consultation response forward.
Do you not have an
What
opinion?
we want to do, what we want to be saying is that, any technology like alcohol locks, like the full suite of technology that they've got in place, there's a full 18 plus the alcohol locks. All of those technologies there to help people be safer on the roads and help people get home at night. And we will be supporting the full breadth of those general safety regulations. There's 19 in total. Alcohol locks is one of them, and we've been campaigning for that to be part of the government's legislation for the last couple of years.
What do you think about this story yesterday in regard to sight tests and people over 70 being given sight tests every 3 years? Some would argue that actually people should be given sight tests more than that, or that it's unfairly targeting people over 70, many of whom are very safe drivers.
Well, we've been campaigning for years for every single driver to get their eyes tested every 2 years, because your eyesight diminishes over time, but it does so slowly, and therefore you don't necessarily notice how it's diminished, which is why it's really important for everybody who's driver to get their eyes tested every 2 years, just to make sure that your sight is just as it should be. Any glasses and those kind of things can be adjusted. So we've been campaigning for that for years. So every 2 years, I think everybody should be getting their eyes tested.
Luca, thank you. That is Luca Straker there, for the campaigns manager for Break, the road safety charity. Looks as though we're speaking to Luca from their house. They're not sure if they're on the second floor. Robert is in the West Midlands and has given me a ring at 0344 499 1000. Robert, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Pete. Can you hear me okay?
I can, loudly and clearly. Robert, go ahead.
Well, I have experience with drink driving because I was hit as a kid.
I'm really sorry to hear that, Robert. That must have been grim.
And I was left for dead by the person who'd hit me.
Awful.
So, for someone like your first guest to come on and say drinking doesn't impair you.
It does. And I pushed back a number of times. I like Christopher Snowden. I've had him on my programmes many times, but he was just talking nonsense on that particular point.
I was a kid, Pete. I was 6. It ruined my life from then on. And honestly, it's not just me. There's thousands, there's millions of people whose lives it affects. So it should be a no limit on. If you touch anything, alcohol, drugs, don't get behind the car, please, because you're going to ruin somebody's life. You're going to kill somebody.
Robert, can I just put one point to you from Ian in Whitley Bay? I think this is a really interesting one. He says, if 1 pint affects your reactions by 11%, what don't we measure for tiredness or other distractions? We have speed limits, etc., to allow for various ability parameters. You cannot sanitise life, otherwise logically the speed limit would be 0, says Ian in Whitley Bay. Look, risk exists, doesn't it? There is risk.
You're choosing to put alcohol in your body. You're choosing to put drugs in your body and get behind the car, which is potentially can kill somebody.
Okay. Robert, listen. Go ahead.
It just makes me angry, Peter, that people don't realise that it destroys lives, and anything behind the wheel, drinking, drugs, don't do it, please. That's the message that's got to come out. Don't do it.
Thank you, Robert. And Robert speaks from his own personal experience there. Thank you to Rachel as well, who says, good afternoon, Peter. I don't think you should be allowed to drive with any alcohol in the system. However, I struggle with fatigue, so I often take the train just to be cautious. Tiredness can kill too. That is a really responsible attitude there, Rachel. I wish more people would do it. And listen, I've been long journeys and things like that. I have occasionally felt quite tired behind the wheel of a car. Often got out, had a bit of fresh air, maybe had a cup of tea or something like that to try to feel a bit more awake. But people do push themselves, and I know quite a number of our viewers and listeners work in the transportation industry. I know there are hauliers who will be listening right now, and I wonder what they think of this as well. What about tiredness versus alcohol versus drugs and all the rest of it? And I do think enforcement is a big, big issue, because you can have as many laws as you like. If you don't actually enforce them, then what's the point? Lots more to discuss on this, but just a reminder that tonight Talk is going to be broadcasting live Premier League commentary of the Crystal Palace versus Aston Villa match on radio only. So if you're listening on the radio, you can hear that for between 7 and 10. Kickoff is at 7:30. Kevin O'Sullivan is going to present the show as usual on all our visual channels. So if you're watching on your TV or your device or the app visually, or YouTube or whatever, you'll see Kevin. But if you're listening on the radio, you will hear Crystal Palace versus Aston Villa. We're going to talk in just a second more about the scandal yesterday. The West Midlands Police Chief, who is still unbelievably in a job. We'll talk to Stephen Silverman from the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism in a second, and I'm going to show you a clip of a young Scottish MP who puts it all together brilliantly in 1 minute and then asks a very, very pertinent question. Find out what it is in just a couple of minutes here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Caroline Levitt is the White House press secretary. She's giving a press conference at the moment, but she's talking about nutrition rather than what we want her to talk about, which is the oil tanker, which we'll be covering a little bit later on. If she does start talking about that, we'll bring it to you, or at least tell you what she says here on Talk Drive. But for the meantime, I just want to come back to a huge story here in the UK yesterday, ignored by a lot of the media, of course, which is the West Midlands police and the lies they told Parliament after the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans were banned from that match with Aston Villa in November. I just want to take a look at Craig Guilford, a man who unbelievably still has a job today, the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police, being asked quite a number of quite searching questions by the Home Affairs Select Committee in Parliament yesterday.
It feels to us, from everything we've seen, that there was a need that you felt that you had to justify banning these fans, and that scraping was done to find a reason.
Right. Well, that's absolutely not the case. I'm really sorry if it comes across in that way. That was absolutely not the case. The information, the intelligence that we received, that we documented, and we've shared absolutely all of that with HMIC FRS very, very recently, was all gone through. The mistake that was made in terms of the West Ham was one individual doing one Google search because he couldn't find the reference because it wasn't there within the system.
We'll come back to this in just a second, but Marco Rubio is the Secretary of State, the Foreign Minister. Let's hear what he has to say in America.
I'll be meeting with them next week. We'll have those conversations with them then. But I'm not having anything further to add to that today.
Can you clarify your comments to lawmakers? Does the U.S. intend to buy Greenland? Does the U.S. intend to buy Greenland? Can you clarify your comments to lawmakers this week?
Well, that's always been the president's intent from the very beginning. He said it very early on. I mean, this is not new. He talked about it in his first term, and he's not the first U.S. president that has examined or looked at how could we acquire Greenland. There's an interest there, but so I just reminded them of the fact that not only did Truman want to do it, but President Trump's been talking about this since his first term.
The White House put a statement last night saying that the military option...
You've lost weight. He's lost a lot of weight. Good job.
They said the military option is on the table. So is the administration really willing to risk the NATO alliance by potentially moving ahead?
Guys, what I think the White House said yesterday is what I will tell you now, and I've always said. The president always retained the option. Every president, not this president, every president always retains the option. I'm not talking about Greenland. I'm just talking about globally. If the president identifies a threat to the national security of the United States, every president retains the option to address it through military means. As a diplomat, which is what I am now, and what we work on, we always prefer to settle it in different ways. That included in Venezuela. We tried repeatedly to reach an outcome here that did not involve having to go in and grab an indicted drug trafficker. Those were unsuccessful, unfortunately.
Well, Venezuela, the people of Venezuela are waking up to the same regime. Do you not worry about that?
Well, first of all, the bottom line is that there is a process now in place where we have tremendous control and leverage over what those interim authorities are doing and are able to do. But obviously this will be a process of transition. In the end, it will be up to the Venezuelan people to transform their country. We are prepared under the right conditions, using the leverage that we have, which includes the fact that they cannot move any oil unless we allow them to move it to... Well, again, I'm not going to give you a timeline on it. We want it to move as soon as possible. But we didn't expect this would... It's been 3 days since this happened, 4 days since this happened. So I understand that in this cycle and society we now live in, everyone wants instant outcomes. They want it to happen overnight. It's not going to work that way. But we're already seeing progress. With this new deal that's been announced and more deals to follow, you are already seeing how the leverage the United States have over those interim authorities is going to begin to lead to positive outcomes. It doesn't cost us. It doesn't cost us.
The involvement, the U.S. involvement in Venezuela, how much will it cost?
Well, it isn't going to cost us any money. For example, this oil deal that's happening doesn't cost us any money. On the contrary, and if it opens up,
no money.
Well, these look, I don't have the numbers. What operation are you talking about? The entire thing?
Yeah.
Well, these troops are going to be deployed. None of these troops sit in a dry dock waiting for action.
Marco Rubio there, the US Secretary of State. We'll come back to Stephen Silverman. We'll talk about the West Midlands Police and their lies to Parliament in just a few minutes here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, that impromptu press conference, what Americans call a spray with Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, their Foreign Secretary essentially, and Pete Hegseth, who is the Secretary of War. Well, that is over now. We know that Denmark and Greece will be consulted, and they'll have a meeting between Rubio and Denmark's Foreign Minister next week on Greenland. We'll hear more about that from Simon Diggins, Colonel Simon Diggins, a little bit later on in the programme. But I just want to return to the West Midlands police issue and play you one more clip. This is Joni Reid, who is a Labour MP. She's the chairwoman of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Anti-Semitism. She's also a member of the Home Affairs Select Committee. She just sums it up to these West Midlands police chiefs really, really succinctly. This is what she said.
What I'm getting from this so far is that there's a range of different intelligence information sources. But correct me if I'm wrong, it feels that what you have done in that process is suppressed information that isn't consistent with the decision that you've made in intelligence, and released and published information which supports the decision to ban the away fans. That's based primarily on the fact that you reiterate the importance of this telephone conversation with the Dutch police, that you didn't circulate John Mann's report or take it seriously, including the evidence from the Ministry of Justice and the National Security Services in the Netherlands. And when our colleagues contacted the Dutch police, they have refuted the claims that are included in the phone call that you made. They have publicly written and published, and I can read it to you now if you want, saying that it's an inaccurate account. It's not great, is it?
It's not great, is it? Joni Reid, Labour MP, speaks for a nation, certainly speaks for our viewers and listeners, and speaks for me when she says that these West Midlands police officers did not tell the truth. They suppressed evidence, they suppressed information, they created stuff, they created information, or they got information to retrospectively back up their claim. Stephen Silverman is Director of Investigations and Enforcement of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Stephen, thank you for your patience. I know we've kept you waiting a little bit today, but this issue is a huge one. How on earth has Craig Guilford still got a job today?
Good question. This feels like it could be a watershed moment in the history of dystopian two-tier policing that we've been seeing for the last 2 years. I mean, every single aspect of this squalid scandal reeks, and it should sound very loud alarm bells, not just for the Jewish community, but for everyone.
It's about, you're absolutely right, Stephen, in that, yes, it's about the Jewish community, it's about the banning of these fans, but it's trust in the police. It's a chief constable of a major police force who has been recalled to Parliament because the evidence they gave the first time round wasn't right.
Yeah, we have a chief constable and a leadership of the force who fabricated evidence to ban Maccabi Tel Aviv fans and then tried to cover it up. They slandered Israeli football fans, they besmirched their names and tried to cover it up. They prostrated themselves on the altar of sectarian politics and then tried to cover it up. Why on earth is Craig Guilford and anyone else in his leadership team who had their fingers anywhere near this sordid mess still in a job? I mean, resignations and not resignations. People need to be fired over this. There needs to be a clear message that this is going to change. This is not acceptable. Policing needs to be carried out across the UK without fear or favour. And just because there is a group of Islamist extremist thugs who want to ban Jews from visiting their city and threaten to attack them with weapons if they come, you don't cave into that. You don't appease it, because if you do, you will just get more of it, and this country will become unlivable for everybody.
I spoke to someone in Birmingham yesterday who said, apart from this issue, West Midlands Police had actually been quite supportive towards the Jewish community over the last couple of years and previously. From your perspective, from the campaign against anti-Semitism, do you trust the West Midlands Police to protect Jewish people?
When you have a police force that is faced with a choice of doing the right thing and protecting and defending visiting Israeli and Jewish fans, or doing the easier and safe thing of caving in to sectarian politics and Islamist extremism. When they're faced with that choice, when it gets difficult and they have to make the hard decisions, and this is what they choose, then no, there is absolutely zero confidence in them. And, you know, according to the survey that we ran towards the end of last year, only 14% of British Jews think that the police do enough to protect them. 83% do not. You know, West Midlands Police are in the spotlight right now, rightly so, but there is a wider problem with policing of Islamist extremism in this country. And, you know, we've seen it week in, week out for 2 years, where these hateful anti-Semitic marches have been permitted. Blind eyes have been turned to what goes on in those marches, and people protesting peacefully against them get arrested. This is why I think this could be a watershed moment. It's been laid bare in all its ugliness now, and I think there is no alternative now other than for the authorities to do something about this.
What about the government in all of this? Keir Starmer said that he was going to sort this out, that this was going to be an issue that he was personally involved with. It is an operationally independent matter for the police, although they were advised by that SAG, that Security Advisory Group, certainly. I just wonder, when Keir Starmer says we're going to give 10 million quid to more security measures, for example, when he lights those Hanukkah candles in 10 Downing Street, all good things, I suppose. But at the same time, I just feel, as a non-Jew, that actually the roots of this are really not being tackled. We're tackling the symptoms and not the cause.
You're absolutely right, and let's not forget, Keir Starmer vowed to tear out anti-Semitism by its roots. And where are we today? Those roots are deeper and wider and thicker than ever. You know, the extra 10 million for security is obviously a good thing, but that is sticking a band-aid on the problem.
It's also a tiny amount of government money.
It is, yeah, but the reasons why it's needed need to be addressed. And somebody has to take a real grip of this, and I stress, not just for the sake of the Jewish community, but for the sake of everybody who wants to feel safe in this country.
And then they came for me. Stephen, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate you talking to us, and thanks for your patience this evening just when Marco Rubio was on there. That's Stephen Silverman there, Director of Investigations and Enforcement of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Thanks to to Gavin in Cornwall, who says, as a recently retired 30-year career police officer, I'm absolutely embarrassed about the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police. The man is a disgrace to the badge and must be sacked, says Gavin in Cornwall. Keith in Oastry says, to make this whole drink driving thing easy, it should be zero tolerance to drink driving. It would also help if breweries made non-alcoholic drinks cheaper and more readily available. I agree with you on the cheaper aspect of things. Obviously, there are many pubs and bars and so on who've been through a huge amount of trouble, but if you're going to say that your non-alcoholic beer or your non-alcoholic wine or gin and tonic or whatever it is going to be the same price as an alcoholic one, well, then I think a lot of people will just say, well, I'll just have an alcoholic one. David Litchfield says, good afternoon, Peter. 2 points. No problem with changes, but the amount of technology in vehicles is often a big cause of distraction. My worry with the next day driving when you think you're okay. I know someone who was caught out that was banned from driving for a year because of the next day. I think it was about 5 or 6 hours, of sort of early hours of the morning, and was caught out and banned for a year and had serious implications for that person's job. Sean in Cardiff says, great show, thank you, Sean. Unlike drivers, cyclists are not subject to blood alcohol limits. Considering there have been incidents where cyclists have killed and injured pedestrians, shouldn't the law apply to them as well? absolutely, Shan, every road traffic law, whether it's drink driving, drugs, whatever the problem is, going through red lights, we see that a lot with cyclists as well, and I am on the side of the motorist usually when it comes to that. Lots to discuss after the break. We've got Colonel Simon Diggins, the military and defence analyst, because the UK and France are committing to deploying troops in Ukraine. We heard there about Greenland as well from Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth, who is the War Secretary. And Steve says this Greenland business is ridiculous. We know Russia and China are desperate to secure mineral resources, hence their activities off Greenland. Why does Trump not negotiate with Denmark to expand the US facilities in Greenland, which he would do anyway? The elephant in the room is that Denmark, particularly through the Faroe Islands, accommodate the massive Russian super trawlers. So as long as Denmark control Greenland, the US could not act without Danish approval. Very interesting thoughts. Thanks everybody for sending them in. Keep them coming in. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I want to talk now about this tanker seizure. Heidi Alexander is the Transport Secretary, and she has told the BBC everything was done in full compliance with international law. We understand that the seizing of this vessel in question had been sanctioned by the US. It was an important operation. We provided some enabling support, and that operation was executed successfully. One man who knows this stuff back to front is Colonel Simon Diggins, the military and defence analyst. Simon, what is going on here? Why was this vessel seized? What's the point of it? And why was Britain involved?
Peter, good afternoon to you. I mean, first, answer the questions back to front, if I may. I think Britain was involved for two reasons. One is that we've supported sanctions against the use of these vessels by Russia to evade the sanctions placed on Russian flagged vessels themselves, so the so-called shadow fleet. And the location's also important. So that it actually took place in what they call the UK, Iceland, Greenland gap. And in terms of the aircraft they needed to employ, including the helicopters, we provided bases and support bases closer to them than the US has for themselves. So I think that we were involved on both bases. It could well have been simply a matter of them saying, can we use our bases? But it appears to be slightly more important than that, because of we agreed with what was required to do here, which was to seize a vessel that had been breaching the sanctions against Russia. The really interesting thing is there appears to be no oil on it. So the issue there was why was a particular vessel seized when it was? Is it something else on there? There's a lot of speculation running around at the moment, but very interesting to what the results are. Otherwise, we've got basically an empty vessel with a lot of Russians on. I know the Russians want to get called; they want to be brought back. Good to know what they want to be for.
Yes, indeed. And I do wonder whether, I mean, do you think it's fine that we were involved? Do you think there's any issue here?
No, I think that the timing is interesting, because we've just had what was, in many respects, a controversial move at the weekend.
Yes.
To remove President Maduro. But I think nobody's really going to cry many crocodile tears over his particular departure. He basically bankrupted his country. 140% inflation, 9 million plus refugees, opposition in hiding. This is not a good man. What he's done to Venezuela, a country with the fourth largest oil reserves in the world, was shameful. So nobody's really going to cry over that. But nonetheless, there was an element of controversy over this. And yet here we are now being involved in an operation, a matter of days later, against seizing a vessel which just come from Venezuela, which was then reflagged to be a Russian vessel, which is all very much involved in this whole nexus of Russia, Venezuela, Iran, and everything that goes with that. And I think that's the interesting about it. And then at the same time, we've got President Trump, opining would be a polite way of putting it, about his aspirations to acquire Greenland, potentially threatening the whole of the NATO alliance. So to say it's tangled would be a bit of an underestimation at the moment. It is extremely tangled. I think people are trying to find a clear way through, but particularly seizing this vessel, I don't have a particular problem with.
I want to talk now about the deployment of troops to Ukraine potential. It's all hypothetical, but the UK and France committing to that. This is what the Prime Minister said on sending troops to Ukraine. This was yesterday in Paris.
We signed a declaration of intent on the deployment of forces to Ukraine in the event of a peace deal. This is a vital part of our ironcast commitment to stand with Ukraine for the long term. It paves the way for the legal framework under which British, French and partner forces could operate on Ukrainian soil, securing Ukraine's skies and seas and regenerating Ukraine's armed forces for the future.
The Prime Minister in Paris yesterday. This is what Nigel Farage, the Reform UK leader, told our colleagues at Times Radio earlier today.
I would vote against. We neither have the manpower nor the equipment to go into an operation that clearly has no ending timeline. If it was a sort of Korean-style UN where lots of countries were involved and we could rotate in and out, I might consider it then. But frankly, what you saw yesterday was Macron standing there with the British Prime Minister. Giorgia Meloni was outside having a cigarette, not getting involved. We had the German gave a speech and said nothing. The coalition of the willing is just two countries. So this would be an open... Frankly, what this would be is a modern-day British Army of the Rhine. When we did that, defence was 5% of our national expenditure, and we were there for 50 years.
Simon, just take us through what both the Prime Minister has said and then what Nigel Farage has said and your reaction to it.
The Prime Minister, I think, in a sense, he's trying to make more political sort of gain from this than maybe it was there. I mean, what we are saying is we are getting on with the detail of how we're going to deploy this reassurance, this coalition of willing, this military training force there. So, and I think that's not unimportant, because there is always, if you like, the sort of operational technical details to be organised and to be arranged. So it's important that they are doing that. I think what Nigel Farage is not wrong, though, in pointing out that the amount of money that's been spent on our equipment and our resources is so considerably less than what we had before. And there is a real challenge about how many people we can actually put onto the ground and how long we can keep them for. I think the military planners planned and hoped for about 10,000 being placed in there. But when you've got an army of some 72,000, of whom I understand some 13,000, so some 17% of that 72,000 are not deployable, it becomes much harder to see how you're going to keep those numbers going. So we end up with a figure of about 7,500 people being put on the ground. Plus, we hope some others of defence and everything to keep them safe. And there's a whole question that needs to be considered about what happens if. The what ifs about if Russia decides to attack, if Russia decides to test the deterrence these forces are in place. So there's a long way to go yet, and for what they're doing. Farage is not wrong to point out that because we are so parsimonious and been so limited in our defence spending over now nearly decades, that we are really badly stretched. But I think it's more important that we get this force in place if we get a ceasefire there, because what we don't want is for Ukraine to be another pawn that's knocked over by Putin after he's given his forces a few months' rest, sorted themselves out, and then he decides to have another go again. So I think there's arguments on both sides that I can see.
We heard quite a lot there from Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth as well a little earlier on. We know that JD Vance, the Vice President, is going with David Lammy, is going to meet David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary. The two men are going to meet for talks as the Greenland threat grows. Given that the UK's position on Greenland is completely diametrically opposed to America, what is the point of those talks, do you think?
Well, I would hope the point would be to speak to someone like Pete Hegseth and to JD Vance and say, look, everyone recognises the importance of Greenland in terms of both the national security of the United States and for the Western Alliance. And it's only when you look at the map, perhaps slightly strangely, you're looking from the North Pole, and you see that the largest concentration of Russian missile systems is in the Kola Peninsula, where it's adjudged next to Norway. And then you look what the flight time would be and where it would go. It mostly goes over Greenland. So clearly, it's important to the Americans and to the Western Alliance more generally that the US is properly protected, and that means they'll probably need to increase the amount of defence facilities they have in Greenland. But neither the Greenland people themselves or Denmark, who has still got defence and foreign policy responsibility for Greenland, are in any way opposed to this. And I hope what David Lammy is able to say particularly to Marco Rubio, is that, look, nobody's going to stop you in the slightest, actually, in terms of increasing your defence profile and your defence systems in Greenland. In fact, we absolutely encourage it, because we understand the threat and the issue as much as you do. But don't please annex this land, which would be very easy for them to do, because you will split the alliance, and that will have a much larger geopolitical strategic effect.
Simon, as always, thank you. Colonel Simon Diggins there, military and defence analyst. Lots of people getting in touch on driving and drink driving limits. Graham in Berkshire is our first caller of the day on Talk Drive. Graham, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Peter.
Hi
well, there are a large number of drugs which are given out by GPs that are very effective.
Yeah.
But you're not allowed to drive with them. But I just managed to avoid going onto one called gabapentin, because my pharmacist said, you do realise you can't drive with this.
Right, yeah. I make you drowsy, yeah. Well, I mean, there are so many things that can impair driving, and actually, do we need to be perhaps maybe a bit more realistic about the fact that there are lots and lots of different factors in this? Tiredness, for example.
Well, tiredness is a bad one, but a lot of the antidepressants, amitriptyline, things like that. And there has to be a way of helping people deal with the fact that they won't be able to drive if they're going to be on these drugs.
Well, you're absolutely right. Listen, thanks for that, Graham. Really appreciate that. Graham in Berkshire there. Matt in Cheshire. Matt, what's your view on this?
Hi, good afternoon, Peter.
Hi there.
All the best for New Year.
You too.
Firstly, can I say never drive after listening to Keir Starmer? That will... I had an eye test for my first set of reading glasses just before Christmas. I'm like in my early 50s, and I was told by the optician that your long sight never leaves you, and it stays with you for maybe your 80s, and it can be impaired maybe slightly.
Do you know what's really weird, Matt? My grandfather wore glasses all the time I knew him, apart from he got to about 86 or 87, and then his sight just kind of weirdly came back, and he didn't need glasses anymore. And I'd never really heard of that happening, but apparently the last time I went to the opticians, they said my sight had got slightly better than it was before. So these things do go in waves, don't they? But what about the alcohol limits?
That wasn't my main point, Peter. Was about we're talking about British people.
Yes.
We're not talking about waves of immigrants that have come in over from foreign countries, where driving licenses are often just pieces of paper handed out.
Yep.
And Amazon drivers and delivery drivers are some of the most dangerous people you ever see on the road. And a guy near me parked in the middle of the road. I live in a steep hill. He left his van in the middle of the road with the doors open. And there was a woman behind him with a baby in a chair on the back seat. Had to stop and put a handbrake on in the middle of the road. So why aren't we testing people? And how do we know half of these people can even drive legally at all?
All of those are absolutely reasonable questions, Matt. Thank you. That's Matt in Cheshire there. And Cliff in Berkshire as well says the problem is that the duty on alcohol is charged when it's made. So most non-alcoholic beers, etc., are made and then the alcohol is removed. But the duty becomes due before the alcohol is removed. That's really interesting, Cliff. I didn't know that. It's up to the gangster state to charge at the point of sale rather than manufacture. Very, very interesting point, Cliff. I've learned a lot from that. I did not know that. It would have made sense if I'd sort of thought about it. Mo in the Midlands says if the limit is 0 and the wife has a tiramisu and she hasn't had a drink, she will be over the limit. I mean, that's a fair point. There are a number of desserts and all sorts of different things. Of course, the alcohol is burned off in many of these things as well. What do you think about all of this? Also, war in Venezuela too, alcohol limits, whatever you want to talk about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Is 1 pint too much? That's the big debate we're having on Talk Drive this evening as the government decides that even tiny amounts of alcohol could put you over the limit. This is a major change to how things are done. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to talk about pubs under threat from Labour's drink driving plans. We'll talk to a landlord in a second. We'll also speak to Barry Mizzen, who's the father of Jimmy Mizzen, who was murdered by a thug called Jake Farry. Now Jake Farry is going to an open prison despite having been returned to prison after putting horrible rap lyrics out there. We'll get the sport this hour as well, and we'll talk to you. Loads of people getting in touch about the Maccabi Tel Aviv aspect, about Ukraine, about driving, lots and lots of different aspects, including Venezuela as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp voice message or a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. We'll also keep an eye on the White House because Caroline Levitt is talking about the US working with Venezuela on an oil deal. If there are any significant lines out of that, we will of course bring them to you here on Talk Drive. And just a reminder, the Talk is going to be broadcasting live Premier League commentary of the Crystal Palace versus Aston Villa match on radio only tonight between 7 and 10. The kick-off 7:30. Kevin O'Sullivan will be here. He's going to present his show as usual on the visual channels. So if you're watching on YouTube or your connected device, you'll see and hear Kevin. But if you're listening on your DAB radio or your smart speaker, you're going to hear football commentary of Crystal Palace versus Aston Villa. Right, on this big story about drivers facing a 1 pint limit in a major tightening of drink drive laws with even lower levels planned for novice motorists, let's hear what the Transport Minister Lillian Greenwood told the BBC this morning.
We're proposing a new limit, reducing it from 80 milligrams per 100 millilitres of blood to 50 milligrams, which would bring us in line with Scotland and almost every country in Europe. We want to send a very clear message to people that if you're going out for a drink, leave the car at home. If you know, there are alternatives. There's loads of our favourite brands now coming zero alcohol versions. We want to do something about the 260 people who were killed last year by a drink driver. It's completely preventable, and that's why we're going to take action.
Lillian Greenwood presumably getting an email from Keir Starmer in the middle of that. That's Lillian Greenwood, who's the Transport Minister. Let's speak to Jerry Kunkler now, who's the pub owner of Moonrakers in Wiltshire. Hello, Jerry. Jerry,
hello there, how are you? Okay.
Where are you? Why do you hide, Jerry?
Well, so I've got a pub in the village of Pewsey in Wiltshire, but surrounding me is a rural area.
Lovely. Tell me about this. Tell me about this policy and what it would do to your pub.
Well, I think the problem you've got is if they can only have 1 pint. I mean, I know for many, many years it's been 80 milligrams. They could probably have 2 pints on the way out from work. I've got people going out from work now, just coming in. And if they drop to 2 pints or down to 1 pint, if you're living in a rural area, another nail in the coffin for pubs. And I don't say I support drink driving. I don't, you know. But there's a way now. They've got to make people change. And kids under 25 years old, they probably won't even know how to drink at all because even a half a pint will take them over. So I think this is another nail in the coffin for pubs, apart from how difficult,
Jerry, how difficult is it for you to run a pub? Is it much more expensive now than it was before? Because there are all sorts of different things, like rates rises, for example, coming down the track, to say nothing of the stuff you've dealt with over the last number of years.
Well, this is where we go. We've got the national minimum wage that's cut in. We've got the national insurance rise. We've got the high cost of electricity. I mean, I've been in this pub 45 years. This Saturday coming, so I've gone through 3 or 4 recessions. But the running costs now are astronomical. I mean, I'm lucky that I'm in a freehold and I've paid for it. But people trying to get into the trade now, and you're going to see a lot of them closing. And this is another nail in the coffin for people in rural areas. You're going to be going back. It's going to be like designated drivers all the time now, I think, you know. So, and you've only got one or two pints.
But even one pint, Jerry, does impair your judgment when it comes to driving, and presumably there are a lot of people who will go for non-alcoholic drinks and beers that are non-alcoholic, wines and spirits that actually taste pretty good and taste the same these days.
Well, you're right. I mean, and a glass of wine carries a lot more volume. So, you know, even if it's the woman that's taking the husband out and has one glass of wine, it's going to tip her over. So, you know, you're nearly better off saying zero drinking at the end of the day, because then you know where you stand.
But what would that do to you, Jerry? What would that do to you?
Well, the trouble is we're trying to do like, you get to January now and all these people jump on the wagon and have dry January. So we're now having to get more informed alcohol-free drinks than that.
And does that make a difference, or is that actually just the same thing? You're still selling them.
The margins are smaller on alcohol-free drinks. I mean, you can find yourself charging a lot, and they say, well, it's just not worth doing it. So, I mean, it's like sober October, and now we've got dry January. I don't know what's coming next at the end of the day. So.
Okay, well, Jerry, listen, thanks for that. I appreciate that. That's Jerry Kunkler there, who's the pub owner of Moonrakers in Wiltshire. Jem Roberts is a spokesman for the Institute for Alcohol Studies. Thank you for joining me this evening. It is true, isn't it, that even one pint impairs people's judgment. But nonetheless, we're hearing from a pub owner there who's saying, look, these very small amounts of alcohol are nonetheless what are sometimes keeping pubs alive, especially pubs that are closing at one, you know, at the rate of one a week. Jem, do you have sympathy for them?
Lots of sympathy for pubs closing, yeah. I don't think it would be fair to say that it's because of lowering the drink driving limit. I mean, Scotland, as we will, I assume, talk about, lowered their limit in 2014. I know you spoke about it earlier, and they saw very, very little impact on rural pubs. And actually, the Scottish Licensed Trade Association.
But they also saw a very small impact on the number of accidents that happened. So actually, was the targeting working? It may not have closed the pubs, but did it actually save lives?
Sure. Let me get to that in a second. Just in terms of pubs, though, it's important to
go ahead.
Focus on what Jerry said as well. Which,
yes.
And it's something that the Scottish Licensed Trade Association mentioned, which is that there are way more and bigger issues with pubs than the drink drive limit. So business rates being an obvious one that people are talking about a lot at the moment, but also the very, very low cost of alcohol in supermarkets. That's the thing that publicans say is the biggest challenge to their business.
And I get that,
really cheap alcohol. In terms of Scotland, and to your question, one of the main studies that you spoke about an hour ago didn't find an initial reduction in drink drive deaths, but it very, very clearly stipulated why they think that was, and that was because of a reduction in enforcement. I think the main point to get across really is that if you want to save lives by reducing the drink drive limit, you have to pair that with much better enforcement, and you have to pair that also with public awareness campaigns. And if you do all three of those things, then you will see a reduction in drink drive deaths.
And the enforcement is the key one, isn't it? Because people will know there's a consequence to this. But given the state of our police in this country, given the fact that you can ring 999 and wait ages for the police or for an ambulance, well, this is actually something that it's about public confidence as well. And if you're going to say to someone, no, friends don't let friends drive drunk, we're going to take your keys, or we're going to give you a lift home, or we're going to call you a taxi, or whatever it is, and the person says, nobody will catch me, the police won't catch me, I'm on backcountry roads, or even in a city where you think actually there's not going to be any consequence to that. That's the key point, isn't it? Or one of the key points anyway, Jem.
Yes, that's exactly it. So visible enforcement, and with this case visibly improved enforcement, is so key to it, because as you say, people have to assume that they will be caught, otherwise some people will flout the rules. Yes.
Things have changed dramatically. You talked about the business rates there, you talked about enforcement and so on. I mean, I don't drink, actually. I haven't had a drink in 7 years. Lonely up here on the Moral High Ground, Jem, let me tell you. And I love my local pub. I think it's a great pub. The people who run it are lovely. They do a brilliant pub quiz. I will go there and have a Diet Coke or a lime and soda or whatever. but actually I often walk past it and I see there are fewer and fewer people in there because the prices are quite high. It's not a place I can afford to go to all the time. The prices are high, and I worry that someday it's going to close, and there'll be a lot of people in their local community saying, look, under no circumstances do we want anybody to drink drive. Absolutely not. We don't want to put anybody at any risk. But it's just in all those things you've mentioned, the business rates, you know, national insurance rises, minimum wage going up, all the rest of it. It's just another thing, isn't it? It's just another thing.
Yeah, I mean, somebody from Break was on your show earlier, and I think they made a really powerful point that this is about road safety. And if there's a small financial impact on some pubs, maybe that's okay if we're saving. I remember lives on the road.
Yeah, Lucas saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's that point, but then there's also the bigger point that I mentioned earlier, which is that if you want to help pubs, if you want to help rural pubs, the way to do that is through business rates. It's through tackling really cheap supermarket alcohol. It's through tackling the power of pubcos over tenants. It's not about drink driving, really.
Yeah, okay. Listen, thank you, Jem. Really interesting to talk to you, and thanks for watching earlier as well. Not every guest does that, let me tell you. Jem Roberts there, spokesman for the Institute of Alcohol Studies. Really interesting to hear from Jem there. What do you think about this? 0344 499 1000. One person says, why fiddle about at the edges? Just have a zero limit. Sight tests. Any sensible person should be having regular sight tests anyway. Stuart in Bristol says, we need to crack down more on all the people who smoke weed while driving. That seems to be growing and a much bigger problem. Stuart, you're absolutely right. I just think, you know, either it's illegal or it's not to take drugs in this country. And when it comes to marijuana, there should be many, many more arrests. We know it screws up your mental health. We know that it impairs your vision, or it impairs your reactions. So we're in a situation where the police need to crack down on it, and they often just ignore it. Tom on that point says, who is going to enforce the new drink driving limits? I haven't seen a copper on the road for years, says Tom in Shropshire. Roy is in Hampshire and has some thoughts on this. Roy, you're very welcome to the programme. Roy's giving me a ring at 0344 499 1000. What do you think, Roy?
Do you not think it's government being tit-for-tat? Because a lot of publicans now have barred MPs, Labour MPs from their pubs, and they're getting their own back.
No, I don't actually. I think there are lots of pubs that are annoyed with the government for lots of reasons. I'm not sure this is the one. And even Jerry, our pub owner who spoke to us a bit earlier on, was saying, look, I don't want anybody to drive drunk. I absolutely don't want that to happen. But I do have a lot of sympathy for the pub owners because it's just another thing, Roy, isn't it? It's just another thing that is going to be difficult for them, or make, for right or wrong reasons, it's going to mean fewer people go to the pub.
Yeah, you're a teetotal, Peter, aren't you?
Yeah.
Have you ever drunk?
Yeah, loads. I drank far too much. That's why I stopped.
So you actually know what it's like to be drunk?
Oh, I know very, very well. Believe me, far too well. Yeah, absolutely. No, I wasn't an alcoholic per se, Roy, but I was a binge drinker and I drank far too much. I could see the way my life was going, and I had a chat with a psychiatrist. He's a family friend, and he said, try going off it for a month, see what happens. Went off it for a month and then just thought, actually, this isn't for me. I'm not a killjoy, Roy. People want to go out and have a drink. I go out to the pub all the time. I go out for meals and things, and, you know, people sitting there opposite me having a drink of wine or a bottle of beer or whatever it is doesn't bother me in the slightest.
Yeah, Peter, can I just mention, yesterday we were talking about the eyesight test for people over 70. Well, I'm nearly 80. And I don't walk too well. So about 3 months ago, I had the opticians come to the house to do my eyes.
Yeah.
I could still drive, although I got a cataract in one eye and I was completely blind in one eye. Anyway, the optician did the test. I said, am I all right to drive? He said, yeah. He said, your eyesight's perfect out of that eye. He said, do you want your other eye done? I said, I'd love it done. I said, but it takes up to 2 years. He said, no. He said, 4 to 6 weeks.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So anyway, cut a long story short, it's like being bald again. I've had the cataract done.
Yeah.
I had an appointment on the 2nd of Jan, which was cancelled because of the doctor's strike. And I've got to go on the 3rd of February and have the other one done.
Brilliant. Well, it won't be a pleasant thing, but the result will be fantastic, Roy, won't it?
It didn't hurt at all. But one thing I can say to your viewers, I left the cataract. I should have had it sorted out. It was touch and go whether they could restore my sight. because I'd left it so long and the cataract was so deep in my eye.
Right.
So I want to just say to your listeners,
yes,
if you've got this problem, go to your doctors now. Don't leave it too long, otherwise they may not be over to fix it.
Well, that is a very good piece of advice, Roy. I hope you're back behind the wheel, absolutely clear vision in both eyes very, very soon. And remember, on your car radio to keep it to talk. Thank you very much, Roy. Appreciate that, and some good advice there for people. John in Kent says a head cold affects your reactions, so maybe we should stop people driving when ill. It's all relative. Becca says everyone knows the drink drive limit. A reduction in the limit won't do anything because those who go to the pub and then drive will still do it, lose their licence, but still carry on driving. No licence or insurance. I know someone who did that. This seems another false flag, like the digital ID, to stop us talking about the more serious issues going on in this country. We're talking about everything, Becca, let me tell you, but listen, thank you for that. Jenny in the Isle of Wight says your grandfather was not alone. He's no longer with us, Jenny, but yeah, he died at the age of, I think, 93. And he, I think it was 87, 88, and his sight basically came back. He didn't have to wear glasses anymore. It was incredible. Jenny says, I've needed glasses to read for 20 years. I'm now 80 and can read without glasses. Has this happened to you? Honestly, it's fascinating. It was a number of years ago now, but I remember it happening, thinking, why is he not wearing glasses, sitting there reading the paper? Thank you to Martin, who says, my mate works in a brewery. Alcohol-free, cost almost twice as much to make because it has to be pasteurised to kill the alcohol off. And Stevie says, great show. As a 30-year-old ex-cop, the Chief Constable of West Midlands doesn't need someone to sack him. A member of the public just needs to make an official complaint to the Professional Standards Department in the West Midlands, and all those involved in this debacle will be subject to an investigation and gross misconduct, says Stevie. Thank you for that very interesting information. I wonder if anybody will do it. I would imagine Stephen Silverman and others at the campaign against anti-Semitism may well be listening and hear that and perhaps even act on that, Stevie. This guy should not be in a job. Craig Guilford should not be the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police. Policing is about trust, it's about consent, it's about being fair, impartial, and without fear or favour. That just didn't happen in the case of Maccabi Tel Aviv. It was absolutely disgraceful. In a moment, we're going to be talking to a great man, a really brave man, a brilliant man called Barry Mason, who is the father of Jimmy Mason. Jimmy was killed by an absolute thug called Jake Farry, who was recalled to prison. I'll give you the full detail in just a second, but Jake was, the killer was returned to prison. He's now in an open prison. Thankfully, he wasn't given parole, but we'll get the latest in all of this from Barry, who now runs a fantastic campaigning organisation trying to keep young people out of trouble. He'll be in the studio in just a second. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
In 2008, there was a teenager in a bakery called Jimmy Mason, and for basically no reason at all, he was murdered by a thug called Jake Farry. Jake Farry is a rapper as well. He was released from prison in 2023, and at that point, you may remember this, and we talked a bit about it on the show yesterday when we were talking to John Lucas about The Sun, and The Sun have covered this story. What happened was that Jimmy Mason died, he was murdered. Jake Farry went to prison for quite a number of years. Then he was released, Jake Farry, and he went on to put quite a lot of hateful lyrics in rap music, played by the BBC on a few occasions, and then went back into prison. Now he's had a parole hearing, and he's been told that he will move to an open prison and occasionally, presumably, have day release and indeed work release for that. Should he ever be let out of prison, actually, when he's so hateful, when he has said and done things that do not appear to show that he has remorse for his dreadful, dreadful crime? The Mason family, Jimmy's family, the victim's family, are an incredible group of people who've set up a foundation in his memory. They try to keep young people away from a life of crime. Jimmy's dad, Barry, is with me now in the studio. Barry, thank you for coming in. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
You've got this parole board decision summary. You've actually been given it this time, and you weren't the time before. What do you make of it?
Yeah, well, this particular summary, I mean, it's still not been agreed. This is a recommendation, goes to the DD department, and they come back and either agree that he should move to open conditions or stay where he is or be released. So that's still got to happen. It could be up to 2 or 3 weeks from now. Be very surprised if the actual recommendation isn't carried forward, take him to open conditions, and I would agree with that decision given the options there. My issue really this time is this should have happened, this sort of outcome should have happened the first time, rather than coming straight out of secure conditions, which he was in. And for the best part of 13, 14 years, I believe he was category A, but he's come from secure conditions straight out. You know, so you spent all your adult life in prison, you're coming out there without any preparation or anything at all like that. So I feel a huge mistake was made the first time, and it's been borne out, the fact that now he's back in prison, back in January. We're coming up to January now, and he may or may not be going into open conditions. I feel this is something that needs to happen across the board. If you've served many years in prison, certain conditions, you need time to relearn how to live in society, to learn how to live and interact with people. And we only do that by mixing with people. So I was very let down, I believe, by the first parole decision. We've now seen a copy of the summary of that, which I didn't see at the time. Usual stuff, ticks all the boxes and the rest of it. Yes, you let him come out, and it was a bad decision. It doesn't do Jake any good.
Do you believe Jake Farry is in any way rehabilitated, especially when the first time he came out, writing and producing drill music that included details of the offence against your son? I mean, that must have been incredibly hurtful for you.
It certainly was. And do I think he's been rehabilitated? I think he has the maturity of a 15-year-old. The system has not worked for him. He hasn't been managed well. He hasn't been advised well, and he should have been. And then maybe there'd be a different outcome. You know, he's released back into society. We knew it was going to happen, and that's okay. We expected that. What I don't suppose we realised is suddenly all the emotions came back with it as well. And of course, each time now, we've got it all again, as we are in this particular time. So I feel that there needs to be a change there for all people in a similar position to Jake, that you serve time in open conditions. You learn how to react with people. You learn how to be civil in your interactions with people. If all you know is the way things go on in prison, it's not really a good preparation to come out, is it?
There may be people watching and listening to this who say you're actually being very generous, very compassionate towards the man who murdered your son. Is that something you feel you have to do? Tell me your thinking around this.
I feel for us, our charity now has the strapline, if you like, forgiveness, peace and hope. We have to learn to find ways of managing pain in life. You, me, everybody listening to this. How do we manage the pain? And some of that can be incredibly painful. We can't let it continue to rule our lives. For me, the important thing was to manage what happened to my son. It took me many, many years to get to the position where I will actually say now, I forgive the boy who did it. But it took me a long time to get there.
How did you get there?
Very, very slowly, and purely for selfish reasons. It would have gone, if I just carried hate, it would have gone on to destroy me, my family, my wife, the rest of it would have gone on and on. So we had to find a way as a family to manage what had happened, and this is the best way. You know, he's faced consequences of actions. It's not as though he hasn't faced any consequences of his actions. If he hadn't, then maybe that would be a different matter. But in this case, you know, if he's now 36 years of age, he needs to act like a 36-year-old, come out of prison and don't go back in again. You know, if he wants to do anything for us, come out, stay out eventually.
When you heard the music that he put out a couple of years ago, when he heard that he was this artist 10 in the videos with some of these horrendous lyrics and so on, what was that like for you? Because you'd presumably gone through this process and said, right, he's going to get out of prison, hopefully he'll have a good life and hopefully he'll be able to reintegrate in society. That must have put you back.
Oh, absolutely. It was surreal. So how did you get these things done? We got a meeting with the Governor General, Tim, I think who's now moved on, hasn't he? Okay. Just to explain, they apologised that their system hadn't picked up the facts of who the actual singer was. Supposed to have changed their processes now, that shouldn't happen again. But there's some awful lyrics. The actual ones that we believe referred to Jimmy were not played by the BBC, but they were certainly available. And now these days, Peter, people get stuff all over the place with Spotify and all the rest of them. Very painful. And you think this is the thinking of a 15-year-old boy. The music he was producing was for 15-year-old kids. And they're talking to a 36-year-old man. You know, there's something fundamentally wrong in there that needs to change. Does our prison work? Does it change people? There's a big question there for people to think about.
We've talked a lot about Jimmy's death. We haven't talked a lot about his life. What was he like? What did he do? Tell us about him.
Jimmy, lovely young fella. He could associate with anyone, kids, adults, the rest of it. He used to work with me on a Saturday. I had my little shoe repair shop in those days. Wonderful memories. He wanted to play a little bit of rugby. His oldest brother played a bit of rugby. Wasn't very good at it, but loved it. He loved life. He absolutely loved life. Greatly missed, still. You know, I think sometimes people think, well, it's a few years now, you should be over things. It changes you. It absolutely changes you in life. You become a different person. That's where we are now. We do the work we do because it helps us.
And tell me about that. Tell me about the Mizzen Foundation, what you do. We know why you do it. You've explained that very, very clearly. Tell us what you do, how practically you help people.
Okay, you get invited. We don't ask. We get invited into schools nationally. I think we're off up Newcastle next week, Luton the week after, or wherever it may be. We get invited to come in, share Jimmy's story, and we do it in a very age-appropriate way. But we like to think we've gone in there with a message of forgiveness, peace and hope, to get young people thinking differently, to affirm and encourage our young people. You know, we live in troubled times, Peter, as we all know, we're all saying it, and as young kids living through that, it can't be easy being a young person this day and age. So for us there, it's to affirm and encourage. We'll let them know they're loved, we'll let them know they're special. And you know you're talking into a group of people that don't hear those words. You know, and so this could be the first time you've been told that actually you matter, you're of value, you know, you are useful, if you like to put it as basic as that. But we get a great response, always get...
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. What do you get from it? What do you hear them say?
Well, for a start, you hear nothing. They sit quietly. And teachers themselves don't know. How do you keep them quiet for 45 minutes? It's because it's a very real story. It's a very touching story. We're not doing scum and all this usual stuff. We're trying to be helpful, practical. We talk to them about forgiving each other, just trying to, you know, eventually, and I can't think of any circumstance when there's a disagreement between two people, whatever it may be, that the only resolution has to be forgiveness. And it could be years and years down the line. But no, we get well listened to. Wonderful young people. We should be proud of them. These are young people in our country. And that's our message there, to affirm and encourage, but forgiveness, peace and hope.
Barry, Jason's been in touch from the Lake District and he says what an incredible human Barry is. I'm not sure I can disagree with that at all. Thank you very much, and keep doing the great work you're doing. Thanks for giving us a bit of hope as well out of the despair and the tragedy that has happened in your family. Barry Mizzen there, the father of Jimmy Mizzen. He works with the Mizzen Foundation, M-I-Z-E-N. You can look it up online if you want to. Thank you so much, Barry. We'll talk more in just a second about, well, all sorts of things. We've got a caller section, so we'll make sure we get as many calls on the air as possible. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you very much indeed to everybody who has been in touch, including Angela, who says, "Good afternoon, Peter. Regarding drinking and driving for safety purposes, drug driving is a serious problem in Surrey, where I live, with many cars stopped where drivers are not fit to drive and many with no insurance. Prescription drugs also pose an issue." Angela, thank you for your message. Thanks also for your Christmas card, which was hilarious and brilliant. And actually, the one you sent for Jack from Rodney, your cat, was, I think, my favourite of all the Christmas cards I received, although there were some brilliant ones. Someone sent me a Diet Coke one. Rosie says government lowering the drunk drive limit is yet another reason to keep people away from pubs. Just remember, people gather and they talk. Mustn't have that, says Rosie. Graham says, "You're right to highlight drug driving, which is not policed in the same way drink driving is. I'm fed up with hearing all the stats that have been ruled out today. I just do not believe that if I go out for a meal and have one glass of wine, I am incapable," says Graham. London Oil Trader says, "Jimmy Mizzen's family is amazing. They went to my child's school." Totally agree with that. And thank you to Disabled Rebel, who says nobody should be drinking and driving. Absolutely no excuse to drink alcohol and drive. And thank you as well to Fergus O'Keefe, who says he enjoyed my Shirley Bassey reference earlier, which I'm not quite sure the guest got. Moonraker is actually my favourite Bond tune, says Fergus, much better than Luca on the Second Floor. That was also another reference I made. Let's hear Anthony on driving.
I mean, this drink drive thing, it's just daft. On the way of that, there's one thing they haven't looked at, which I don't believe they looked at, and maybe you could tell me if they have, is people on their mobile phones. I see at least, and I'm on the road every day, 30 people minimum a day on their phones or in between their laps with their eyes pointing down below the steering wheel. That is more dangerous, or as dangerous, as serious drink drivers. On your mobile phone, you look away for 2 seconds, look at your woman, you look up, you're in the back of a car. That is the worst thing, especially for youngins, especially for young kids. They're constantly on their phones. They can't keep off them. They should ban everyone on their phone or it's in their lap. That's what they should do. Ban those lot. Not start attacking businesses because someone's had a couple of pints.
Anthony, you're absolutely right on the mobile phones issue. And actually, a friend of mine is a copper, and I did ask him on one occasion, I said, if you're sitting at lights, if you're, waiting for the red light or waiting for the green light, obviously, and you have it in your line of sight and you have your phone and you look at a message or whatever, is that okay? He says, absolutely not. You cannot legally be in charge of a vehicle and be on a mobile phone, certainly with your hands anyway. That's not to happen. Obviously, you can do hands-free calling and things like that, but you can't hold it and look at it and do text messages and so on, and that is not cracked down enough about, and it is incredibly dangerous. Joe is in Bournemouth and has some thoughts on this driving story. 0344 499 1000 is the number he has called. Joe, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello. Yeah, it's just in regards to the stats being thrown around and prioritising things. I just find that we seem to be prioritising the wrong things, and I've not actually got a thing whether we should be able to drink at all or 1 pint, 2 pints.
What should we be prioritising?
Well, when you look at, you've got over 50,000 knife crimes a year happening. You've got over 5,000 people committing suicide a year, and then they're concentrating on 260 people dying from drink driving when the stat we're looking at is actually how many of that 260 people died with someone drinking between 1 and 2 pints.
It's a very good point, and actually a critical person, and I read all the messages that people send me, even the ones that say I'm in the payment of the Israeli government. If only, I'd love the money. There was a person who said, why on earth are you talking about this, and why on earth you're not talking about Russia, you're not talking about Greenland, you're not talking about this, that, and the other. We're talking about everything on this programme. But Joe, it's a very interesting point about policing priorities, because if something's a priority, it means other things aren't a priority, and actually this perhaps isn't the world's biggest issue, but the government can look tough on this, can't they? Maybe that's what they want.
They can do that, and they can also take away from the news of the day, which is the police lying.
A very good point. We're talking about that too. Joe, thank you very much indeed for your views on that. Great call there. Peter's in Dorset and wants to talk about Ukraine and the troops that we've committed there if things go right in terms of a deal. Peter, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, good evening to you. I think the situation is completely, basically, arse about face. The situation is ridiculous. In post-1945, and for some years after, there was national service, and the British Army was beefed up. And we had the Berlin Wall, and armaments were strong. Now, the situation is we have a rundown army and forces in this country, which has been run down for the last 30 years. And the situation is that if we start sending people abroad, basic to the Ukraine, we have no one at home. And we've got a situation where we've got news coming out that Putin's got missiles that can just blow up our navy without no problem. He's going across airspace. We've got weak armed forces. We've got a border that we can't even control at the moment, and this is weakening the country. And again, I've been on your show before, and I'm telling you now, this is another thing that Starmer is trying to do to weaken the United kingdom.
What is his interest in weakening the United Kingdom? I mean, his argument would be, I disagree with his argument, but his argument would be that it actually strengthens the United Kingdom because Russia can't come west. I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that. I'm simply saying that that is his argument.
Peter, he hates the United Kingdom. He hates everything that's going on. Look what's happening with the pubs. Again, we've got a situation where tourists come from all over the world to come to our pubs. We love our pubs here in the UK ourselves, and this is an institutional situation that we adore in this country, and it's being run down, and they couldn't care less. As long as we've got a diverse situation and all these migrants coming in, and there's a Muslim vote for Starmer when he wants it in a few years' time, fine. We have got a situation where we are completely being weakened, and we sit here and you sit there and your presenters sit there, and I listen to your show all the time, and all that's going on, Peter, sadly, is talk, and more talk. Nothing's going on. Defence spending's not going up. Starmer is doing the stuff that is absolutely opposite to what we should be doing as regards defence in this country. There is no movement here, Peter. Where are we going?
I think all of that is absolutely fair, Peter. And first of all, thank you for your loyalty to the station and to my programmes. I appreciate that. But the point is there, and lots of people are saying defence spending needs to rise, and that is a consistent message. It's something the government is moving towards to some degree, but there's a lot more that needs to be done, and certainly if there are going to be drains on that when it comes to troops in Ukraine, if this deal goes through, well then that is fewer people who are at home to defend the country here. So Peter, points very, very well made, and thank you for that. Gavin in Cornwall says there's a retired police traffic officer. I would ask your dopey guest, Chris, that's Christopher Snowden, who was on at the start of the programme from the Institute of Economic Affairs, to accompany me to tell a family that their loved one was seriously injured or killed by a driver who had been drinking either above or below the limit. I attended many fatals. My guess is he has never lost anyone through a traffic accident, says Gavin in Cornwall. Well, I don't know that about Christopher Snowden or his personal history, but you're absolutely well informed and entitled to that opinion anyway, but certainly through your experience too, and thank you for bringing it to me here on the programme. Terry in Slough says, I'm 76 and when I was growing up we used to respect the police. Now in my opinion the police are fast becoming a joke, says Terry in Slough. Terry, you're right, but it's worse than that. It's worse than a joke. It's a pernicious force. The police lying, as that caller was saying a minute ago. It's about the police lying when it comes to Maccabi Tel Aviv. Amanda agrees with this and says not only did the West Midlands police chief lie, he tried to blame a presumably junior colleague for not being thorough enough as an investigation online. It's despicable behaviour. Linda in Deal says the leaders of the West Midlands police should be prosecuted and not allowed to resign and fill pensions. Also, all the other police forces that allow anti-Semitism to thrive in this country should take note. I'm ashamed of the police and the weak government, says Linda in Deal. The boss simply says, Barry Mason, what a man, with a heart emoji. I totally agree with you. Barry is a really inspirational guy. And Sally in Surrey says, Peter, when my son died and via homicide victim support, Barry rang me. He talked to me about grief, the shape and size of. I've never forgotten his words, which helped me so much. I'm so sorry Barry had to go through this rapper nonsense. Give him my love and thanks, please. That is Sally in Surrey there. We will pass that on to Barry. Listen, thank you, Sally. And that is testament to Barry, who does great work dissuading young people, keeping them away from the life that Jake Farry has chosen for himself, and I would imagine saving some lives in the process. Lots to discuss. We'll get the sport next. Dean Scoggins, who is Deputy Head of Sport for the Sun, is standing by. We'll take more of your calls, text, tweets and voice notes coming up in just a few minutes here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Tim in Suffolk's been in touch and he said, I've listened to all of the discussions on alcohol levels for drivers. One wonders, will these apply to cyclists, pedestrians, scooter riders as well? They all cause traffic incidents. And Smudge in Swindon says, Cardi P, the problem with the new proposals regarding drink driving is that it's just more hot air. Like shoplifting, the police do not have the capacity to enforce the law without an increase, a major one, in police on the ground. It's just diversionary politicking, says Smudge in Swindon. Diversionary politicking. Try saying that after a couple of pints. Just a reminder that tonight Talk is going to be broadcasting live Premier League commentary of the Crystal Palace versus Aston Villa match on radio only tonight between 7 and 10. The kickoff is at 7:30. So if you are listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, you're going to hear that commentary of Crystal Palace versus Aston Villa. However, if you watch on YouTube or your connected devices on your TV, your computer or your app or your iPad or whatever, you're going to get Kevin O'Sullivan as usual. He's going to be on all the visual channels. You'll be able to see and hear him, but only on YouTube or your connected device. So that is tonight. We're splitting the radio and TV bits of what we do. And now we will hear from Dean on the sport.
Sports News from The Sun.
Dean Scoggins, Deputy Head of Sport of The Sun. How are you doing? You're
I'm
right?
good. Yeah, you?
Nice to see you. Very, very well, thank you. It's a bumper night of Premier League action, including here on Talk, as I was just saying. 8 matches happening. Talk us through it.
Yeah, well, you started there. So, I mean, Villa can go 3 points off Arsenal if they win tonight. Arsenal playing tomorrow, so a massive game for them at Crystal Palace. But the really big one, the one that most eyes will be on, will be at Burnley, actually. Manchester United go to Burnley. Sacked Ruben Amorim this week. Massive shockwaves through the whole Premier League. The second sacking of the week, so we've had a very quiet week since coming back from the year. Chelsea as well, yes. So Darren Fletcher is in interim charge of Manchester United tonight. Be very interesting to see his tactics, the way he lines his team up, given that Ruben Amorim's tactics were so controversial. He's interim boss, Fletcher, but they are looking at reappointing Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Man United, for the rest of the season, with Michael Carrick potentially joining him. So it's sort of an old boys act, a legends act at Man United that we could end up with. They're 6th in the league going into tonight's game. So all eyes really on Manchester United, but Manchester City can go 3 points off Arsenal as well. They go to Brighton. Newcastle host Leeds, and Tottenham, my beloved Tottenham, go to Bournemouth. But more interesting, much more interesting than Tottenham actually, is Antoine Semenyo. So that could be his last game for Bournemouth before he makes a £65 million move to Manchester City. And you mentioned Chelsea there. Liam Rosenior is the new Chelsea manager, but he'll only be in the stands tonight watching. He'll take charge of team affairs tomorrow, but they go to Fulham tonight. So yeah, it's going to be something to try and keep up with tonight.
Certainly, you mentioned Spurs. There's sad news about Martin Chivers.
Yeah, very much so. And as I said, I'm a Tottenham fan, and I've met Martin a few times. So very sad news is that Martin Chivers has passed away, announced today by the club, aged 80. He's one of the greatest players to ever play for Tottenham. He's the 3rd highest top scorer behind Jimmy Greaves and obviously Harry Kane. 415 appearances for Tottenham, 202 goals. I was lucky enough to meet him a few times at some club events. Just an absolute pleasure to be in his company. Like, absolutely amazing guy. He kept such an affinity with Tottenham as he went through, was always at the club, was always doing the half-time entertainment, being involved in the sponsors' lounges, and also, I would say, and this wasn't really publicised very much, also there to offer support to young players as they came through at Tottenham, which, you know, was an amazing thing. So the club statement says, it's with immense sadness we announce the passing of our legendary striker Martin Chivers. Deepest sympathies to Martin's family, friends and former teammates at this incredibly sad time, and obviously Tottenham will wear black armbands this evening. Tributes from Steve Archibald, from all people associated with Spurs, are pouring in. He started his career at Southampton, Chivers, before moving to Spurs, and I would say only getting 24 England caps was something. It was before my time watching football, but it's something that my uncle and my family members always talked about. 24 England caps, 13 goals, just wasn't enough. He was better than that.
Let's talk a little bit, just before we finish, on Arsenal facing last year's champions Liverpool. Will Arsenal be confident going into this tonight?
Yeah, they will be, and obviously they'll be watching
tomorrow,
comfortably.
I should say.
Yeah,
Apologies,
tomorrow. Yeah, they'll be watching comfortably tonight as everybody else tries to get a bit closer to them. But interestingly, that there's the famous old song which the Arsenal fans still sing even when they're winning, which is "Boring, Boring Arsenal." But it's Arne Slot who's actually said that Liverpool have become boring. So he's very upset that obviously they've slipped 14 points off the lead this year. Liverpool fans were used to their heavy metal football under Jurgen Klopp, but despite spending £450 million over the summer, Liverpool are really struggling to score goals, really struggling to attack, and Slot's not very happy about it. So maybe they'll give it a good old go at Arsenal tomorrow.
We will see what happens. Thank you very much indeed, Dean Scoggins, Deputy Head of Sport for the Sun. And just a reminder that Talk are broadcasting live Premier League commentary of Crystal Palace versus Aston Villa tonight on radio only, but on the telly side of things, if you're watching through your connected device or on YouTube, you can see and hear Kevin O'Sullivan on that. We'll talk more in a second just about the drink driving, but just let's remind ourselves of the Transport Minister Lillian Greenwood setting out the drink drive proposals.
We're proposing a new limit, reducing it from 80 milligrams per 100 millilitres of blood to 50 milligrams, which would bring us in line with Scotland and almost every country in Europe. We want to send a very clear message to people that if you're going out for a drink, leave the car at home. If you know, there are alternatives. There's loads of our favourite brands now coming. Zero alcohol versions. We want to do something about the 260 people who were killed last year by a drink driver. It's completely preventable, and that's why we're going to take action.
Well, let's hear a voice note from Elisa in Chelmsford, who has some thoughts on this.
Regarding drink driving, I'll never forget attending the scene of an accident. 3 men went to a local nightclub to celebrate a 21st birthday of one of them. They decided they wouldn't drink and drive. Instead, they took what they thought was a minicab at the end of the evening. But he wasn't a minicab driver. He was simply a man driving under the influence of alcohol. Driving at 90 miles per hour in a 30-mile zone, the driver drove head onto a tree. He managed to walk out with a slight cut to his forehead, but the 3 men were seriously injured. I accompanied them to the hospital. A short while later, I had to inform the father of the 21-year-old that he sadly died on the operating table. I'll never forget that night, and that's the reality of drink driving.
Elisa, very, very interesting to hear from that. Elisa is a former police officer, and that would have been, well, that's obviously stayed with her many, many years later. Thank you for sharing your experience, Elisa. Thanks to this person who sent this message in to say, regarding the drinking restrictions, not only can the police not police the issue, but the courts will not be able to process the new convictions that will come from it. I do think this is a smokescreen for Labour posturing. I personally choose not to drink if I drive. Be sure I'm a grown-up and make the right choices. Craig says, hi Peter, with regards to the drink driving conversation, I assume drink driving means you're over the legal limit. If you lower the legal limit, what is going to change the people's minds who think it's okay to drive over the limit? People who break the law do so by choice, and changing the law won't stop them breaking it. We just need to punish people per the laws that already exist, says Craig. And that's a really, really good point, and a very interesting one that goes to the heart of this issue, because there are so many laws in this country that are simply not enforced. And the government's always coming up, successive governments, not just Labour, Conservatives, Lib Dems, whoever, coming up with ideas and saying, right, we're going to pass a new law. Well, actually, if you're not going to enforce it, and if there aren't the police there to enforce it, or you're not going to have the will to enforce it, and the courts are being clogged up, we're going to talk about that after the news, actually, well, what's the point? Simon in Paddock Wood says, look at your telephone while you're being while you're at a red light is especially dangerous. Yes, Simon, I made that point earlier, and thank you for it. James says, I have no problem with the change to drink driving laws. People should, however, remember roads are shared spaces used by vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists, horses, etc. And if we are serious about road safety, everyone has a role to play. But please bear in mind, roads are for transport. Anything that moves carries risk, says James. Well, lots more to discuss on this, and I talked there about the courts being clogged up. The Conservatives are going to force a vote on Labour's plans to axe juries. We'll speak to the former Justice Secretary Alex Chalk in just a second. Also, the taxpayer facing a £100 million bill for an unusable prison. This is MPs branding the Ministry of Justice handling of the affair a catastrophic failure and an absolute disgrace. We'll talk to Rear Admiral Chris Parry as well about the US seizing the Russian flag tanker in the Atlantic and what has gone on there, and Chris's views on that, and also the weather, the new snow and wind warnings in the UK. So much to discuss, so many opinions. If you want to get yours on the air, it's 0344 499 1000. I'll take plenty of calls in the next hour.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. It's just gone 6 o'clock. I'm Peter Cardwell. This is Talk Drive. We're going to talk in a second about taxpayers facing a £100 million bill for an unusable prison, as MPs have branded the Ministry of Justice handling of the affair a catastrophic failure and an absolute disgrace. We'll talk too about Labour plans to axe juries and the Conservatives trying to force a U-turn on that. We'll speak about the US seizing a Russian flag tanker in the Atlantic, what's going on there, and the weather. I don't know if you noticed this, it's pretty cold. Plenty to discuss on driving as well. Lots of people trying to get on the programme, and we'll put as many of them as we can on between now and 7 o'clock on the driving issue, the drink drive issue, getting that limit down. Is that the right thing? We'll talk to people about Venezuela, about ambulances, and about Maccabi Tel Aviv as well. The lies that were told to Parliament, unprecedented for a Chief Constable of West Midlands Police, Craig Guilford, who inexplicably still has a job. Kemi Badenoch's called for him to go, as have many others, but after being recalled to Parliament, and a story not quite stacking up, let's face it. Lots to discuss. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a voice note, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 7. Stay with us here on Talk. So in Parliament, there's something called an opposition day debate. Usually the government of the day has control of the legislative agenda, what Parliament does, what's debated, what's put forward. But there are opposition day debates where the opposition, and sometimes opposition parties, smaller ones as well, get to put motions forward, get to debate things. And something the Conservatives are talking about is they're trying to force a vote on Labour's plans to scrap jury trials for less serious offences. It's quite interesting because there are quite a number of Labour MPs, 39 of them actually, breaking cover to urge Sir Keir Starmer to withdraw the proposal. There's been an open letter sent by them. Backbenchers say they were an ineffective way with dealing with the crippling backlog. Carl Turner, who's one of them, said there was grave concern at the planned changes. You've actually had quite a smorgasbord of politicians from lots of different types of political thinking around this. John McDonnell, for example, the hard left former Shadow Chancellor, he has been united with Sir Gavin Williamson, the former Conservative Education Secretary. David Davis, the ex-Brexit Secretary, they are united in their opposition to this. And in December, the Crown Court backlog has hit about 80,000 cases. The government says it will deal with that. I haven't spoken to a single solicitor or barrister who says actually it will deal with the Crown Court backlog in some way. I want to speak to Alex Chalk now, Alex Chalk KC, who's the former Justice Secretary under the Conservatives. Alex, you're very welcome to the programme this evening. Will this actually make a difference, this policy, or are the Conservatives right, to your party, to try to force a U-turn from the government?
Well, look, I think they are right to force the vote, and if I were in Parliament, I would vote against it, because what David Lammy is proposing is something that goes beyond what Brian Leveson, Sir Brian Leveson, indicated in his proposal. So look, the starting point is there is an issue here. There is a problem. You talked about the backlog. Just to put it in context, just before COVID, it was around 39,000. It's now knocking on the door of 80,000. And the impacts are horrendous for victims. And I don't know if you remember that gambling allegation about the date of the election. One of those trials isn't due to take place until 2027, 3 years after.
Absurd. Absolutely absurd.
It's completely absurd. So look, my view is something has to be done, but that something has got to include, one, putting funding into the so-called sitting days, which in plain English means all the courts running at full tilt.
Which they rarely, if ever, do, Alex.
Which they rarely, if ever, do. And that needs a bit more money. And by the way, it's fairly modest sums of money. You're talking, £10 million would make a huge difference and probably allow you to run at full tilt. That's the first thing. And second, if you are going to make an adjustment to where the boundary is for jury trials, and by the way, 90% of all criminal cases are tried in the magistrates' court before we lose all perspective on this, right? But if you are going to shunt that boundary, I think they've shunted it too far. I think the British people will not like the fact that you could be charged on an offence, you could be tried for an offence where you could go to prison for 3 years by a single judge. My feeling is that is too much, right? That is too much. And so I would not put the boundary where it is. I also am not comfortable with fraud cases, all serious fraud cases being heard by a single judge. So the bottom line is they've got to do something. First thing they've got to do is put more money into the system, more sitting days. They may have to shunt the boundary a little bit, but they should have stuck with the Leveson proposals as opposed to going further than is necessary, in my view.
Can I ask you about another story that is in the news today? MPs blasted a catastrophic failure by the Ministry of Justice, which could land taxpayers with a £100 million bill for an unusable prison. This is £4 million a year to lease Dartmoor Prison from the Duchy of Cornwall, even though the building's uninhabitable due to contamination by radon gas. Now, this contract was signed before you became Justice Secretary. Presumably, when you were Justice Secretary, you knew about it. You were locked into it. Tell us what happened here.
Right.
And is there any way to get out of this? Is the £100 million simply going to be paid?
So it's a great point. So yeah, you're absolutely right, it was signed before. But I actually went down to Dartmoor because I heard about this issue. And I think there is a massive... people are looking at this issue through the wrong end of the telescope. Everyone is assuming this should be closed because there's radon. By the way, there's been radon coming from the bedrock of that granite down in Dartmoor for 200 years. This is a prison that was opened during the Napoleonic Wars, right? It's been there for a huge amount of time. And the point is that the prison officers who work in that prison live in houses which are also on the granite bedrock, who also experience radon in their homes. And the thing that I found extraordinary is that given that there hadn't been suddenly new and elevated levels of radon, why it was.
So is there any issue here then? Could the prison actually be used?
The issue has been, this is exactly right. So I took the health and safety executive to task about this. And why are you closing Dartmoor prison in circumstances where there hasn't been some geological earthquake which has suddenly emitted loads more radon? Why is it that prison officers are okay to live in homes where there is radon, but prisoners can't live in Dartmoor? And I have to tell you, I never got a particularly adequate answer to that. So if I'd still been in office, the question I would have been asking is, why on earth are we not reopening Dartmoor? And I would just make this point: it was an excellent prison, and it dealt with some of the most difficult offenders, particularly sex offenders. You know, you've got to put them somewhere, and you've got to make sure it was a very well-run, safe prison. And so I think the real question here is, yes, of course, there's an issue about money being spent. That's a critically important issue. But the even bigger issue is, why isn't Dartmoor being used as it has been for 200 years?
I mean, our viewers and listeners will, and I am appalled by that. So we're in a situation where, because some lanyard-wearing fool at the health and safety executive says, well, there's a bit of radon gas and that might be an issue for people, we've got to pay £4 million a year as taxpayers to keep a prison which is, in your view, perfectly usable, closed, when it could be open, housing people, dealing with the crisis in our prisons and the overcrowding.
That's the bottom line.
That's absurd, Alex. That's absurd.
I think it is. Look, it is absurd. And there's without boring your listeners, there's a technical issue about whether some legislation, which originally derived from a directive, had been about radon levels, whether it had been properly transposed, etc. Look, it's very complicated and boring. But the bottom line is this: that is a prison that has exactly the same levels of radon that it had 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. It is not at all clear to me. It wasn't clear to me as Secretary of State, and I was climbing the walls about it. And I was saying we should not be decanting prisoners, because if it's good enough for prison officers, frankly, it's good enough for prisoners. That's my clear view.
Alex, thank you for joining us this evening. That's Alex Chalk, KC, the former Justice Secretary. That's appalling, absolutely appalling what he's saying there. He's talking about £4 million a year for a £100 million bill for an unusable prison, which is actually usable. There's radon gas there. Health and safety executive say that it is unusable, but actually it's fine. The prison officers have the same homes and built on the same rock. Crazy. Chris Daw is a leading barrister and author of Justice on Trial. Chris, thanks for joining us. On the jury trial aspect, are you going to be the first barrister or solicitor I've spoken to, and I've spoken to many of them on camera and off camera, who says, well done, David Lammy, scrapping jury trials is a really brilliant idea that is going to solve the crisis in our justice system? Is that you, Chris?
Well, it would be a surprise if it was me, because I've spoken to Jeremy Kyle and I've also spoken to Ian Collins about this issue. And I think any of your listeners who've ever heard me speak about this or any other issue won't be surprised to know that I think this is one of the most crackpot ideas that's ever come out of any deeply unpopular government of all time. I mean, you know, the point I made to Jeremy, for those who didn't hear the first time, was this: this is rather like the government saying we're going to ban kittens or start charging for air or something. I mean, jury trials are quite literally, I think, one of the most embedded kind of elements of our society that have almost 100% approval ratings. I mean, you talk about barristers and solicitors not being in favour of abolishing jury trials, but, you know, I've done a few Vox Pops. I've literally just asked people in cafes, oh, you heard on the news they're thinking about, you know, scrapping jury trials. And people are like, what? Are you crazy? That's insane. I mean, literally everybody, doesn't matter black, white, posh, not so posh, doesn't matter who you are. The one thing I think that we can all agree on, apart from the fact that the government is deeply unpopular at the moment, is that jury trials are part and parcel of the fabric of our society, of who we are as citizens of this country, going back to at the very least, the 13th century, and in fact, a bit earlier in some versions of jury trial. It's just part of the culture. It's part of who we are. And the excuses and nonsense that the government have been coming up with for this. I mean, I agree with your previous contributor about the fact that one of the major problems, if not the major problem, is that about 20% of the courts on any given day are not working and not even sitting because you know, the heating's broken, or there's been a flood, or the toilets don't work.
Some of the issues I hear about from solicitors and barristers are just crazy. I heard from someone who said, look, the judge says we've got to do this thing. Hands out a bit of information and says to the clerks, "Can you photocopy it?" And the photocopier doesn't work and hasn't for years. You go in and the fabric is literally coming off the curtains. There are courts that don't sit because there are vans that transport the prisoners around from prisons, and there aren't enough vans and there aren't enough van drivers. I mean, jury trials and scrapping juries does seem mad. Why on earth do you think David Lammy is doing it? Who's told him that this is a good idea? Why has he decided it's a good idea?
He's been given a bit of top cover by Sir Brian Leveson, who came up with this equally crackpot idea of creating a completely new court. I mean, as if that's going to stop the backlog. A totally new court called the Crown Court Bench Division, which would involve judges sitting with magistrates and no juries to decide, just crackpot nonsense. But it gave David Lammy enough top cover to say, well, Sir Brian Leveson's an experienced judge and he said that we don't need juries for some of these cases. So what we're going to do is quadruple down on his proposal. And effectively, his original idea was, well, we're going to get rid of 95% of jury trials. Now he's saying, well, we're only going to get rid of, 50% of jury trials? I mean, so that's not so bad, is it? I mean, it's just ridiculous, absolute insanity. And just think about one thing. So Lammy is trying to say, well, some of these cases are not so serious. Doesn't really matter. 3 years in prison is not very serious.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to know how many people are driving around listening to this thinking, oh, it's only 3 years. I'm not bothered about a jury if I'm only getting 3 years.
Chris, I don't want to be sort of conspiratorial about this. However, will there be occasions when you say, right, if it's over 3 years, it's going to be a jury trial. If it's under 3 years, it's not going to be a jury trial. Will there be charging decisions made by the Crown Prosecution Service with that at the very least in the back of their mind, saying, are we going to go to a jury trial here? That's a lot of extra hassle. Let's see if we can do it in the lower court, or indeed with less serious charges being brought there. Am I being totally tinfoil hat here?
No, you're describing what's been going on in the criminal justice system since time began, and certainly since I've been a lawyer for over 30 years. Yes, I mean, that's already the case, because although magistrates' courts at the moment do deal with 90% plus of criminal cases, in 99-point-something% of those magistrates' cases, nobody goes to prison. It's not about going to prison. They're imposing fines and driving bans and other forms of penalty, which, yes, we can accept as a compromise, are reasonably sitting within a magistrate's court, and they're not sending people to prison for year after year. So the point being this: at the moment, magistrates only have the power to give a 6-month sentence for a single offence, or 12 months for a series of offences, which in reality means about 4 months or 5 months in prison. So that's about the limit of how long you can go to prison without a jury trial being an option. Okay, and so since time began, the CPS has done exactly what you've said. If they have a choice between charging, for example, what's called an either way offence, which you can elect jury trial, or charging a summary offence where you can't, where the maximum sentence is 6 months, then yes, that has happened since time began, and actually rightly so in some cases, because on a borderline case, if it's really not that serious, then being tried in the magistrate's court where there's very limited risk of imprisonment may well make practical sense. But when it comes to you or I, our whole lives being on the line, our career, if we're convicted of theft or a sexual offence or something like that, which is just devastating,
or even accused of it in many cases, yeah.
Yeah, well, exactly. Even being accused of it is bad enough. But the idea that you could be convicted of anything significant like that without at least having the right to a jury trial. You may choose not to. At the moment, you don't have to have a jury trial just because you have the right to one. And some people, for all sorts of reasons, choose to be tried in the magistrate's court. It depends on the situation. But let's be honest. If it's you or me, if it's one of my kids who's alleged to have, even if they're alleged to have stolen an iPhone, which was one of the examples that David Lammy's got, then they should have the right to have that tested by a jury, because if you're convicted of a crime like theft, that's probably going to stop you getting all sorts of jobs in the future. Even if on the face of it, well, it's only an iPhone, what does it matter? What does it matter is that your life and your reputation depends on a not guilty verdict, and the best way to secure a fair verdict in any criminal trial is undoubtedly just to pick 12 ordinary people with no kind of skin in the game, no knowledge of anybody involved, no prior history or prejudices about how cases work. They just listen to the evidence, they weigh it all up, and they go in a room, and 990 times out of 1,000, they come to a verdict which everybody accepts and respects. And that isn't the case, I'm afraid, for cases decided either in the magistrate's court or decided by judges.
Chris, thank you. That's Chris Daw, who's a leading barrister and author of Justice on Trial. Thanks for joining us on Talk Drive. I just want to tell you some breaking news, and that is that Kevin Keegan, the former England and Newcastle manager, has been diagnosed with stomach cancer. His family say he'll now undergo treatment with them, thanking medics for their intervention and ongoing care. Kevin Keegan won 3 league titles with Liverpool. He also represented Newcastle and Southampton. He's 74 years old. He played 63 times for England and scored 21 goals. So our very, very best wishes to him and his family, the former England and Newcastle manager Kevin Keegan, diagnosed with stomach cancer. I want to speak to Jill in Cornwall about the Maccabi Tel Aviv aspect, the problems in Parliament yesterday, the lies that we were told, and the fact that the Chief Constable was recalled to Parliament. Jill's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. You're very welcome to the programme, Jill. What would you like to say?
Well, isn't it horrific, honestly? The people supposedly who are more legal and have to sort of arrest people that break the law are the ones breaking the law. I mean,
well, we don't know if they broke the law, but we certainly know that they were recalled to Parliament because the Home Affairs Select Committee did not believe them.
Yeah, but if it's proved that they lied, and that lie affected a huge part of the country and what have you, and the football game and supporters and things like this, yes, I think that is breaking the law. If I was to do it, then I would be accused of, breaking the law. My concern is that, once again, this is Midlands Police. I mean, over a while ago, they were talking about the Midlands Police Force losing control over things like grooming gangs and what have you. And it just feels like the country is dividing in half. We have...
although things not necessarily better in Avon and Somerset with the... Bob Villain problems, the Metropolitan Police, many problems there as well, and many people saying they're not doing nearly enough when it comes to these similar issues of anti-Semitism. Jill, problems everywhere. Well,
it does feel like everywhere, though this particular thing with the chief of police, not just a constable, but the chief of police, then it just makes you wonder how they're steering how people behave, how they act, and what have you in certain parts of the country.
You're absolutely right, Jill. And if you can't trust the Chief of Police in the West Midlands, who can you trust? It's a very, very good point, and thank you for making it, Jill. I appreciate that. I just want to tell you before the break that here at Talk we're welcoming the new year by giving away a massive £26,000. What better way to kick off the year than the chance to win some serious cash? Yes, 26 grand. It's our biggest New Year cash giveaway, and it could be yours. 26k for 2026. You can enter for your chance to win. Text TALK to 83338. That's 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate, or you can call 0343 423 9761. Lines close at midday on Friday. That's when you need to answer your phone if it rings. You've got to be in the UK, got to be over 18. It's a network promotion, full terms and conditions at talksport.com/win. So if your chance to win, text TALK, TALK, to 83338 now. Lots more to discuss after the break, including what on earth is going on with this tanker in the Atlantic. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, the United States says it has seized an oil tanker with links to Russia and Venezuela, as well as another vessel in the Caribbean. The White House has suggested US military action in Greenland is always an option. Let's get into all of this with Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Parry, former NATO and Royal Navy commander. Chris, what on earth is going on?
Yes, this is basically the United States saying, look, our national security strategy says this, and we're now implementing it. So what's been going on with these tankers? It's part of a worldwide network called the Ghost Fleet that Russia is running. It's all to do with sanction-busting oil trades between Iran, Venezuela, China, and also Russia, of course. And what's been going on? They've been using flag of conveniences to actually cover these vessels. So, for example, one of these tankers had a Guyanan flag. When the Americans started chasing it across the oceans, they changed it to a Russian flag and Russian ownership, so implying it's a government vessel. And I think they thought that gave it immunity. Now, for example, the one that's just heading up through the Greenland, Iceland, Faroes Gap at the moment, that one essentially started off in the Middle East, in Iran. It came round to the North Atlantic. It was heading for Venezuela. It then diverted back towards Murmansk in Russia, and the Americans are saying, well, we don't care, whether it's where it is on the world's ocean. It's a rogue. We're going to take it out, and that's what they've been doing.
What do you make of Russia's reaction? Russia says no state has the right to use force against vessels properly registered in other countries' jurisdictions. They say that it was only temporarily flagged to Russia. Can we take them seriously at all on this?
No, of course not. I mean, whenever the Russians say anything, you have to look what's behind it. They've been trying to protect these vessels for quite a long time now. They've been rumbled, basically, in relation to these sanctions, and they don't like it. The Americans, as we know, are much more robust in terms of putting their money where their mouth is, and they've said, I'm sorry, we're not putting it up there anymore. And indeed, they've involved us with our surveillance capabilities in intercepting one of these tankers. I wrote in 2014 in a book I wrote called Superhighway that this sort of thing was likely to happen in future, whereby countries would assert their rights in relation to criminal activity and also enforcing sanctions.
These are unprecedented times, Chris, and not just because it's the first time I've seen you wearing a hoodie. Greenland is a big, big issue geopolitically. What do you think is going to happen?
Okay, there's no way that the United States is going to invade or even take over Greenland. I have to say, Peter, and you probably know this already, it's been on the agenda of quite a lot of American presidents for about 100 years. It started with Teddy Roosevelt. Truman, before NATO was formed in 1948, said, look, we kind of like Greenland, to tell you the truth. So it's not a Trump idea. It's been going for some time. The fact of life is that the Americans, as I said, are trying to remove any Chinese influence from the Western Hemisphere. They've already said, this is our hemisphere. We don't want Chinese all over Venezuela. We don't want the Chinese into Greenland. The other thing with Greenland is that you've got a fairly, shall we say, left-wing government, devolved government in Greenland that doesn't want any mining of rare earths or indeed any other minerals. Now, the Americans are keen to get free trade on that, as long as it's not the Chinese. The third point is that Greenland is in the fly-through space for all ballistic and hypersonic missiles that can come off the top of Russia. So where most of Russia's strategic assets are that can be fired at North America, they can be fired across the pole and across Greenland. And what the Americans are saying is we're not getting enough access to be able to put surveillance systems and other systems in there. And by the way, Europe and Denmark, you're not doing enough to protect this space here up in the north. Now, it's a similar situation, oddly, to what's going on off Ireland at the moment. You've got Russian and Chinese ships regularly inside Irish territorial seas and also in their offshore zone. The Irish aren't in a position to protect it. It constitutes a threat to the United Kingdom if you put missile submarines or ships there. The same thing happening in Greenland. We're being asked to defend it better.
And some of the Irish equipment, as you will know far better than I do, over 50 years old. I want to talk a little bit about the coalition of the willing when it comes to Ukraine. Nigel Farage talked to Times Radio a little bit earlier about whether he would agree that British troops should be on the ground in Ukraine. This is what he said to our colleagues at Times Radio.
I would vote against. We neither have the manpower nor the equipment to go into an operation that clearly has no ending timeline. If it was a sort of Korean-style UN where lots of countries were involved and we could rotate in and out, I might consider it then. But frankly, what you saw yesterday was Macron standing there with the British Prime Minister. Giorgia Meloni was outside having a cigarette, not getting involved. We had the German gave a speech and said nothing. The coalition of the willing is just 2 countries. So this would be an open... Frankly, what this would be is a modern-day British Army of the Rhine. When we did that, defence was 5% of our national expenditure, and we were there for 50 years.
Should say, just for full transparency, Chris Parry is Reform UK's mayoral candidate for Hampshire and the Solent. Let's just keep us all on the right side of Ofcom with that and electoral law. Chris, what do you think about this issue?
Yeah, well, obviously I've spoken to Mr Farage about this, and of course I largely agree with his views, but not because he's my party leader, but because that's what I think anyway. The fact of life is, unless you're trained, equipped, and also authorised to fight Russians, you're not going to be able to deter them. And any idea that putting NATO troops into Ukraine, for example, is something that Vladimir Putin is going to put up with is not been agreed yet. Now, where Mr Farage is right is you need a UN resolution. And of course, Russia is part of the permanent members of the UN Security Council. They'd have to abstain or either approve it. So there's a bit of a problem straight away. I have serious worries about what the end state and the outcomes are going to be. One of my biggest criticisms of Afghanistan, Peter, was the fact that ends, ways and means just didn't exist. You had no political outcomes established, you weren't given enough resources, and also the military capability to actually achieve what we thought we were achieving wasn't available. And so nothing in strategic terms could be achieved. I suspect we've got the same problem in Ukraine. And I've jokingly said to my army colleagues, this is going to look a lot like camping for fun. If that's the case, it ain't going to keep any peace. My own view, and it is my own view rather than the party view, is the fact that the best peacekeepers you can have in Ukraine are the Ukrainians. We should arm them to the teeth, and we should actually say where the red lines are in terms of either providing air watch, as we did in Iraq when Saddam Hussein was in power, and also at sea as well. The fact of life is, unless you've got, one thing I learned throughout my career, unless you have properly defined political outcomes from any deployment of armed forces, it will go wrong.
Chris, great to talk to you as always. Rear Admiral Chris Parry, former NATO and Royal Navy commander. Just for full transparency, he is Reform UK's mayoral candidate for Hampshire and the Solent. I asked him about what Nigel Farage had said there a little bit earlier on. Loads of people getting in touch about drink driving and these new limits that are being proposed, including Rich, who has sent me a voice note.
Some of the most prolific drink drivers only go 200 yards or 3. So they're still going to do it. It's not going to change anything. Yes, catching them, that's massive. And the police, how can they catch somebody driving 200 yards or 300 yards or half a mile? You'd have to have police stops on every street corner. It's never going to change. I'll have it 0. Totally agree. But it's not going to stop anything. It'll make people who just have 1 point have none. And I totally agree with that. But the ones who have 10, 12 and drive, they're still going to do it.
Very interesting point there, certainly, and thank you for making it, Rich. But actually, the actor Adam Rickett, he was in Coronation Street and then he became a pop star. He was done for drink driving a couple of years ago. He runs a bar, actually, and his home apparently is fairly close to that. He got into the car essentially to move his car. It was about 600 or 700 yards. And even within that journey, he was stopped by police and done for drink driving and banned from driving and fined, if I remember correctly. So it can happen, certainly. Lots of calls, texts, tweets and voice notes coming up. We'll come to all of those and get your opinion on all the big issues of the day. If you want to get your voice on the air between now and 7 o'clock, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
In about 20 minutes' time, Kevin O'Sullivan will be here, of course, in the studio. And if you want to watch and listen to him, you've got to go to our visual channel. So whether it's YouTube, whether you're watching on your iPad, your connected device, your smart TV, however you want to watch us, you've got to watch Kevin tonight. Otherwise, you are going to have the benefit of a commentary of Crystal Palace versus Aston Villa. Talk is going to be broadcasting live Premier League commentary of Crystal Palace versus Aston Villa on the radio channel. So if you're listening on your DAB Plus radio or your smart speaker or however you just listen to us rather than watch us, there's going to be Premier League commentary from 7 till 10. The kickoff is 7:30 in that match. But Kevin will be here in the studio presenting a show as usual on our visual channels if you are watching on YouTube or your connected device or your app or however you do that. Thank you to Margot, who has said, I am the owner of a rural pub in Somerset. I'm at the centre of a tiny village, more of a hamlet. I rely on customers driving down the country lanes to visit. I've lived in my village for 35 years, owned the pub for 20 years, and I've only taken car keys away from a customer on 2 occasions, which I consider my duty to do as a landlady. And there's the rub, responsibility plus fear. I don't think the limit needs to be lowered. Most people who cause accidents are actually not having a drink, they are drunk. I think a better way would be a massive anti-drink driving campaign, as in the past, alongside increased police presence. That is what will affect people's behaviour, fear and enforcement. As for everything else, I worry how I will survive. My fuel costs have quadrupled, food and drinks costs at least doubled. On top is the national insurance contribution rise and minimum wage. We employ a lot of young people. We watch them grow, we see them out into the world, older, wiser and more confident, treat them as family, and they often come back to introduce their fiancés, partners and children. They see us as family. We employ 3 chefs, all are local and their families. A country pub is so much more than the sum total of its building. My husband was killed in a car crash 7 years ago, not drunk driver related, and my eldest son and I have battled through, survived lockdowns and ridiculous rules, the rise of supermarket meal deals and low alcohol prices, but honestly, I fear for our future, says Margot. On top of everything else, remember when you walk through my door and order even a cup of tea, that's 20% VAT, which is another killer. As for business rates, as a country pub, I'm not sure what I get for them. We don't have street lighting, we're not in main sewerage, I have to pay for refuse and recycling collection, another cost that's risen. I only ever saw a policeman during lockdown, and our roads are covered in potholes. What am I paying for? Margot says, I love my village, I love our customers, but even they are feeling the pinch, and I can't increase pricing anymore. Debts are mounting, and if I lose the pub, then I will be in serious jeopardy. My son will lose his livelihood alongside with our staff, and I would lose my home. That is the horrible reality. That was a long message from Margot. I usually don't read out messages that are as long as that, but I just thought Margot has just encapsulated it so succinctly in terms of what she is actually dealing with in running a pub and these extra pressures that are put on her. We will come back to that issue in just a second. I know there are a number of people who want to get in with calls, and that will take as many calls, text, tweets and voice notes as we can between now and 7 o'clock. And we'll also have a chat to Kevin O'Sullivan about what's coming up on his programme. But in the meantime, it's still cold, and Joe Wheeler is here again, my favourite meteorologist from Square Raindrop. Joe, still cold, what's happening?
Well, it is still cold, but technically we're now in the calm before the storm. And I mean that
quite literally.
Yes, this is Storm Goretti. It was named by the French because they saw it first. La 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 la. But we would have named it anyway. It's going to bring multi-hazards to the UK. It's another one of these storms which isn't actually there yet. It's going to cross the jet stream and then arrive in the southwest as this very volatile area of moist air with very strong winds. Now, of course, moisture, cold air, we're likely to get some snow on the leading edge. What will be unusual with this is that it will turn back to rain for a time, and then the cold air comes around the back of it. So you might get snow, then rain, then snow. Some places will just get rain, but we've got these very strong winds. And the far southwest of Cornwall could see gusts up to around 80, 90 miles per hour, potentially with a sting jet, which would take it to over 100. So that's back to 1987 standards. Not saying it will happen, but there's a potential there with this storm for it to happen. Meanwhile, we've also got amber warnings for parts of Wales and the Midlands, Birmingham included in that, where we could see up to 20 centimetres of snow, and again with very strong winds. Either side of that, so we're talking parts of the northwest, parts of the east coast, again, some very dramatic weather, very strong winds, and some intense and torrential rain at times. Scotland and Northern Ireland, they just continue with their wintry showers. They're kind of used to that now over the last few days. It stays cold. And indeed, the cold air comes back again. And on Sunday, there's another attempt for this milder air to come in, another weather front coming from the west, which again will run into this cold air and is likely to give a fairly widespread snow event. So really, it's all eyes on the weather. As far as Friday morning is concerned, many people are being advised not to travel unless they have to. And I think that's a very wise warning.
Joe, thank you as always. That's Joe Wheeler there, meteorologist from Square Raindrop. Really appreciate all of that. Simon Pettican is a lawyer, a criminal lawyer. He says magistrates can sentence up to 1 year in a magistrate's course. Yes, Simon, that's right. If it's multiple offences, we did say that earlier on, but thank you for that nonetheless. Amanda says, how encouraging to see good men like Rear Admiral Chris Parry being part of Reform UK. It gives us much needed hope for the future, says Amanda in London. Interestingly, actually, Nigel Farage, I should have asked Chris about this and I didn't, but I'm sorry about that. I should have asked him, but I know Nigel Farage was critical actually of Chris Parry because he had, Chris Parry had said that David Lammy, the Justice Secretary, should go to where he came from, and essentially David Lammy, of course, born in this country, but his parents are from the Caribbean, and he was criticised, Chris Parry was criticised by Nigel Farage at that press conference today. I didn't ask Chris Parry about it. I should have done that. Apologies for not doing that. Let's hear a voice note from Adrian on prisons.
My father was a prison officer at Dartmoor Prison, and no one escaped. And when they did, they ended up in the bogs of Dartmoor. They were easily caught, and so they didn't bother to go away. And when they went in, they were deloused, they had their hair cut, and they had prison uniform, and they did what they were told when they were told. And they served long sentences, and some of the worst prisoners in the country came to Dartmoor from other prisons who couldn't deal with them. It was one of the most secure places in the UK, with the exception of Parkhurst, I believe.
Thank you for that, Adrian. I appreciate that, and really interesting background there. Certainly Alex Chalk was in favour of it. He was Justice Secretary and should know these things, and said that Dartmoor was an excellent prison. And why has it been closed? We don't know really. Well, this raid-on has been given as a excuse essentially, but we're paying £4 million a year for apparently no reason. It does seem absolutely absurd. The driving laws and the drink driving laws, lots of people getting in touch about that, including Dallas, who says, hi Peter, if 2 pints so seriously impairs driving judgment, then surely the roads would currently be a bloodbath with nightly scenes of carnage. As they aren't, that implies the current level is about right. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just more nanny statism, in Dallas's opinion. Rufus says Scotland has the lower drink drive limit, but accidents and deaths have risen. It's not drivers just over the limit that are the problem. It's drivers and many drinks on board or taking drugs. No limit will change it without police able to stop those drunk or drugged. My police service showed the police on the roads in the past were the only way that drivers were stopped. Their manner of driving drew attention to police patrolling and were arrested. Today, no police are patrolling roads and intervening with driver poor behaviour. We need more police on our streets, not policing tweets. Let's speak to Steve in Shropshire on this. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Steve, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi Peter, great show as always.
Thank you.
No worries. Trucker for over 30 years, mate, still on the road, and the biggest problem I see for people not concentrating is distracted driving due to the mobile phone.
Mobile phone's the big one.
And surely the easy way, there's got to be a way with this technology going forward as we are, is you sit in the driver's seat, you put your seatbelt on in any vehicle, your phone goes to no signal except for 999. There's got to be a way to do a geomap.
So tell us what you see, Steve. When you're going round in your lorry, what are you actually saying? People on the phones? Are they talking with it to their ear? Are they texting? What are they doing?
They're doing everything, mate. We sat high up, as you know. We're looking down. There comes a set of traffic lights, roundabout, road, problem in the road. First thing people go for is the phone. It's just that they're addicted. People are addicted to their phone, aren't they? Let's be honest. And social media and all of that. So the only way to stop it, fines aren't working, cameras aren't working, accidents are happening all the time due to distracted driving, mainly due to the mobile phone use, is put a signal stop, a block in that car, you put the seatbelt on in the driver's seat, and it goes to no signal.
Very interesting idea. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
There's got to be a way around that.
Yeah,
Drag in moment for you there, Peter.
Well, listen, that makes sense to me, Steve, and you know what you're talking about. I really appreciate it, Steve. Thanks very much, and thanks for your loyalty to the station as well when you're going around in your lorry. I hope we keep you company. Robert is in the Wirral and has some thoughts on the Maccabi Tel Aviv absolute fiasco of lies that Parliament was told. Robert, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good evening, Peter. Thanks for taking my call. Yes, I'd like to make some comments about the hapless bunch of weak, rogue and wet police commissioners that were recalled to the Commons Committee yesterday. Their performance was pathetic and showed to me that the myth that diversity is our strength is an absolute lie, because when you can lead a police force that can be cowed by the threat, apparent threat, alleged threat of perhaps violence against one group, then you are not acting impartially. And I would like to compare and contrast with the Tom Hoffman in the United States, who is the chief of Customs and Enforcement, Immigration Customs and Enforcement, who leads with his chin and believes in what he says, and he does what he believes.
Yeah, I think that example is certainly something we can look to. What should happen now, do you think?
What's going to happen now is...
What do you think should happen now?
What do I think should happen now is that those four gentlemen that were paraded in front of the Commons Committee should be sacked. They demonstrate to me perfectly the woke agenda that is pervasive in our police force. They've done a great disservice to the good policemen and women who serve that uniform with pride and do a great job. But those four gentlemen, I'm afraid, let themselves and the service down badly.
Thank you, Robert. Thanks for your thoughts this evening. I appreciate that. Dawn in Chelmsford says, with all the actions being taken by Russia and China, we need to be vigilant. Meanwhile, Starmer is probably going to let China open a super embassy in a sensitive part of London. Gary's in Leicestershire and has some thoughts on the driving statistics and bans and limits as well. Gary, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Yeah, mate, just quickly, I just had a quick look at the stats, because it's always about the numbers, isn't it? Policy led by, 261 people died due to drink-related driving incidents. I don't know what the situation was, but, 1,700 people total died from other reasons. So I would say that the priorities, if you want to reduce deaths on the road, is looking at the 1,400.
Yeah, the other people who died on the roads,
Yeah, you're looking for maximum impact, aren't you? If it's about reducing deaths on the road, right, we've got 1,400 people, non-drink related, and that's all going to be about speed. Pete, we spoke yesterday. I told you about I lost my licence. I
remember. Yeah.
Just we did have time because I was late on. Give me an idea if you're looking for an instance. I've got a false eye. I had to go for a fitting. You nodded up. Super by the NHS. The nurse that fitted it for me told me about, she goes, we've got several people that I fitted eyes for that are still driving trucks and buses.
Wow, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, if you want to, maybe nobody's been killed, but, you got the NHS condoning breaking the law because you can't grant
I'm not marrying that up with other parts of the authority. Gary, good to talk to you again. Very interesting to hear that. Thank you. Final call of the evening for Brian in Blackpool. Brian, you want to talk about Venezuela? Tell us your thoughts on this.
No, actually about Greenland.
About Greenland? Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
I just had a WhatsApp call from a Major General's office. He used to be in an office there. He reminded me America signed an agreement in 1951 with Denmark that America had sole defence agreements over Greenland. Not Denmark, but America has it.
Okay.
Now the second thing is, I was a London cab driver for 50 years. And most people don't realise the government keeps giving out these figures about deaths on the road and drink and everything, but they don't say that if a pedestrian is drunk and walks out in front of a car, that is termed as a vehicle accident.
That's a very interesting point as well, Brian. Yes, I hadn't considered that actually, yeah.
I'm afraid I live in the northwest of England, and most of the pubs here, the car parks are absolutely jam-packed full of cars. It's a tradition you go out in your car, but they don't think one person should take about 4 people, but they just don't.
Yeah. Brian, really interesting to talk to you, and thanks for that point, particularly I hadn't thought of before. That's Brian in Blackpool there. Thank you to him. Thanks to everybody who has tried to get on. We haven't been able to get everybody on today. It's been a busy show, but thank you for that. Kevin O'Sullivan is coming up after the news on the telly, if you're watching on YouTube or your connected device, and on the radio we're going to have Crystal Palace versus Aston Villa. Kevin, what's coming up in your programme?
We're going to kick off with this police chief, Craig Guilford, the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police, who stands accused of lying through his teeth about why Jewish fans were banned from Aston Villa. Now, we'll go into the details in just a minute, but what is interesting about this guy, who I think is in a world of trouble, he is the ethics lead for all police chiefs.
Brilliant.
He's the ethics boss of all police chiefs. So his ethics are under investigation, shall we say. Kemi Badenoch saying he's got to go. I think she's got a point. I can't see how he can hang on. We'll have a look at the new draconian drink driving rules. You can only have now a teaspoon of beer, apparently, before you get behind the wheel. Lee Anderson has stopped paying his TV licence because he said he refuses to put his money into the pension pots of the BBC's perverts, which, by the way, hooks in very nicely with a story we'll break later on in the show that Channel 5 are going to make a TV drama about Hugh Edwards.
Interesting.
So we're having a look at that. Germany has halved its asylum seeker influx in a year with a series of actually fairly straightforward hardline measures, nothing draconian, halved their problem. America down to 93. They've got it down 93% down. Why can't we do this?
Yeah,
so we'll look at that.
It's a big question. Lots to discuss with Kevin coming up after the news here on the visual side on YouTube or your connected devices. If you're watching on your iPad or on your app or however you're watching, it's connected TV, smart TV, you'll see Kevin. If you're listening on the radio channels, you're going to hear Crystal Palace versus Aston Villa match commentary. The kickoff there is 7:30. Lots to discuss tomorrow on Talk Drive between 4 and 7. I will be in the hot seat for that, as well as on Friday as well. In the meantime, thank you so much for all your comments and calls. Sorry we didn't get all of them on. There's so much more to discuss with Kevin, who's coming up in just a few minutes after the news. Stay with us.
2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side